All right. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Onyx Report. This is Dr. Hasan Johnson. Hoping everybody is well. Um, Having some sound issues. Got this new Go XLR mixer. I've had it since last week. But last week I got complaints that my mic is low, and it looks like we might have some other strange effects when I bring my guests up for today. What's up, Kalila? See everybody in the house here. Malika, what's going on? Thanks for that support. Guys, go ahead and support the show. So we got a few people in the house. We see Damon, what's happening? Force Windu, what's going on? All right. Hopefully you guys saw my dedication to my Patreon and YouTube members. So want to shout everybody out. Appreciate that support. Now, just I hate doing this, but I kind of have to because I really I'm having trouble getting my sounds together. So you guys tell me, is my mic low this time? Is it too low? Give me a one in the chat if my mic is too low. And I guess give me a 2 if it sounds okay. So 1 if it's too low, 2 if it's okay. Okay, I'm hearing people say it sounds okay. All right. Most people saying 2. All right, so well, at least we got one thing a little better from last week as far as the sound is concerned. But like I said, when I bring my guests in, we were experiencing a little bit of a sound issue before I started. That's why I'm about a minute late, and I'm hoping that we can figure it out. So I want to apologize in advance if there are any. Damon says 1. Okay, so most people are saying 2, but I'm still getting a little bit. So, all right, I've turned it up a little, but hopefully that works. Okay. All right, so let me at least get us started here. Actually, there's one other thing I want to find out. I'm wanting to test this, and I got a captive audience, so like I said, bear with me. Okay, tell me, can you guys hear that at all? Can you hear any music? You guys give me a yes or no if you can hear any music. Okay, so I'm hearing a couple of yeses. What's up, Cameron? See you in there. Is it too loud? Is it low? How are you guys hearing it? Okay, good. Because I actually wanted it low. Yeah, good. I wanted it really low. All right. All right. So, before we get started, all right. I said just right, talking over it. That's what I want. Yep. Okay, so just wanted to start us out. You guys know, have a new membership program on YouTube. You can click the join button right next to the subscription button. No matter what you do, like, share, and subscribe, please, if nothing else. If you're not yet a subscriber, please go ahead and click subscribe. I've been shadow banned by YouTube, so my numbers have been doing some weird stuff, but go ahead and subscribe if you haven't. And if you're interested in becoming a member, you can click the join button. You can see the levels of membership here. Excuse me. It starts with the lowest gold level membership, and then it moves up to diamond, onyx level membership. You get access to the film reviews that I'm doing. And then if you're interested in becoming a Patreon supporter, you can become a film review Patreon supporter there, and you get the same perks as diamond level membership, especially as with the after shows we have called office hours, which are every Wednesday right after this show. So the link for that, you can go to my channel right there on YouTube, and you can look for the community tab, and you'll always find the link to the show. To my Patreon film review supporters, you can go into Patreon. The link will be there as well. And that is an office hour discussion on the show we just had, on the topic we just had, but it's just for my members. So you can go ahead and become a member right now, and you'll be able to join in the office hours show. And if you're at least a diamond level member, you can actually come in and talk with my guests and myself. Lastly, we have the newest level memberships, the Meteor level and the Black Opal level members. And from there, you can actually enjoy some other kinds of perks. Romello, appreciate that support. But in the meantime, whether you're a member or not, please, like I said, like, share, and subscribe, and go ahead and support the channel. All right. Let me. All right. I appreciate that, Force Windu. All right. All right. Now I'm going to bring my guests up because I was not going to tackle Lovecraft by myself. There's too much going on in the world and in my life and in Lovecraft. So let me bring in my esteemed guests. We have my brother BGS and my brother the G with the PhD, Green Gorilla. Welcome back to the Onyx Report, fellas.
What's going on?
All right.
What's going on?
Okay. How are we sounding, fellas?
Still a little bit of a delay, but hey, we can work with it.
Okay. You guys let us know in the comments if the delay is really bad. Is there a significant shift in the mics between the three of us? You guys let us know because we're kind of working this as we go. 164 in the building. Again, like, share, and subscribe. All right. But how are we sounding?
They said they can hear a little echo.
Hear a little echo, yeah. Adisa, what's up, Professor? Good to see you in here. All right. Yeah, I'm not sure what that is. Ian, what's going on? We got Mr. Blue Collar in here. What's up? Douglas, what's happening? MLR. Okay, yeah, so it's saying the echo is coming from my guests. And we messed with the mixer. I'm not sure what I did. I don't know. All right, so Kashif said he's been waiting for the review for a minute. Oh yeah, we got BGS. Yes, got him watching Lovecraft.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's gonna forgive me, but
No.
he watched it.
No, I will not forgive you.
I'm not sure if he will, but
unforgivable sin. I'm sure Gigi feels the same.
Hey man, I got my own thoughts about it, but
yeah, gee, we about to go in. But I actually asked both of them if they'd be kind enough, because you guys know how I do. We go through current events first, and they're going to be kind enough to kind of dive in a little bit with this, because there's so much going on that I wanted to definitely engage some of that. So, here we go. Get us in here. All right. So I think we bumped up to like 190, so we're doing pretty good. Officer Faulkner, what's going on, man? All right. You guys definitely need to support, because we watched this mess to help you. So this is just a sacrifice of sanity. Actually though, let's see. I'm gonna go ahead and skip straight to current events and get this through. Now, this is somebody that jumped into my Twitter and commented on my work on heterophobia. And apparently he was offended that I talk about heterophobia and that I somehow decentralized queer black men to the periphery, right? And so I just want to share with you how I go about defining some of these concepts, right? I'm not going to take a lot of time on it, especially since you can screenshot it if you so choose, but this is how I approach heterophobia, and specifically what I address when I talk about it. And this was inspired by Dr. Ronald Neal, actually, right? He talked about this a couple years ago, where he talked about anti-black male heterophobia as the idea that heterosexual black males are to be hated because they are wicked, evil, and to be feared. So when I talk about it as a fear of straight black males, which has a long history in the United States. This is not limited to the last few years. If you talk about lynching in the United States, especially due to accusations of the rape, of rape of white women in particular, that is very much a fear of straight black males. This is not new. The term may be new. The phenomena isn't, right? Now, how this decentralizes gay males, I'm not sure. But at the end of the day, talking about the fact that straight black men are feared is simply a reality, right? But the interesting thing about it is heterophobia can apply to even gay black men because it has to do with how you're perceived, right? It doesn't have to do with what your sexuality actually is. When cops beat up on you, they don't take a poll to ask what your sexuality is. But the assumption being made is the key component to this, and it can be applied to women as well, particularly if they're perceived as highly masculinized. So the concept of heterophobia and the fear of straight black men is not limited to straight black male bodies. It has to do with how it's perceived, but yet and still, and I say this unapologetically, overwhelmingly impacts straight black men. Shout out to Mr. K as well as Mr. Heat. Thank you for the support. All right.
Well, the funny.
Go ahead.
The funny thing about that, and I know there's echo, but please tolerate it. For the most part, black lesbian feminism decenters black men, straight black men, and it's not a problem with that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a problem discussing the ways in which straight black men are subjected to fear. I mean, primarily, if we look at the, I'm just turning my sound off because it's kind of throwing me off a little bit. But if you think about, and I'm just trying to make my words clear so I don't fumble it up. But if you think about social dominance theory, the most masculine men are going to be the ones who are feared the most, or the ones who are going to be looked at with suspicion the most because they pose the most threat to the so-called socially dominant men. Mm-hmm. So just makes sense to me.
Yeah, they're saying this echo is nasty, and I'm see, the thing is I can't hear it, but GG and BGS were telling me about it before we went live, so I don't know what exactly to adjust. So we apologize for that.
Yeah, Dr. Johnson, try muting your mic when GG talk.
Okay, here we go. Go ahead.
You're still there. No, that's not there. Maybe I got a suggestion for you. But do you still hear?
Mute yourself on StreamYard, Dr. Johnson.
Oh, you said mute myself on StreamYard?
Yeah.
Okay.
See what happens.
Okay. Yeah, we're still echoing.
It's still there. Yeah.
Go into your settings on StreamYard. And see what you see there.
Okay. Tell me if that's any different.
Check. I still.
Yeah, we're gonna have to soldier through.
Either that or you shut everything down, turn it back on, and start over with.
Not an option.
I truly am sorry, people. I'm not sure what it is. It's the second week in a row we've had some sound difficulties here, and I don't know what's going on with it.
Yeah, but black heterophobia has been going on for a long time. Like I said, even before the country was country. Because they've always been afraid of black male uprising and violence, stuff like that, or black male actually changing sides for foreign forces. So heterophobia, black males have been around for 300 years. And it just got transferred over to white women afterward.
Now, somebody asked me to try echo cancellation. Let me try. Okay, I just clicked echo cancellation, so
check.
Still there. We have to figure it out later.
I don't know what it is, people. I truly apologize. I don't know. Is anybody listening to YouTube while we're broadcasting?
No.
I'm not either.
So we'll have to listen to it.
Yeah, again, people, I apologize. So sorry about that. This didn't happen last week, nor in the office hours, but we're going to go ahead and go through. My apologies, people. We'll figure it out, though. Maybe not tonight, though. But the second part I wanted to just say is, look, I also deal with the discrimination against gay black men. And the way I frame it is in the context of how black men have been framed in this country in regard to masculinity or manhood. All right, and this goes back to Dr. Tommy Curry's work in The Man Not, and he gives us the history, right? The most particularly in regard to ethnologists, but the history of how black men have been framed. First during slavery as childlike beings, and then of course as we transition into the 20th century, we end up becoming these kind of massive threats and rapists and so on and so forth. So in that whole transition, that whole narrative of black manhood, one of the things we see is the effemination, the feminization of black men, most particularly from the beginning, right? And this is also connected to the sexual violation of black male bodies during slavery and onward. I mean, as a matter of fact, the majority of lynchings that we've had happen in this country have also come along with the sexual violation of black males. The anus, the removal of the penis, the scrotum, so on and so forth. There's always been a sexual component to the torture and abuse of black male bodies. That in turn plays a role in how black men, gay or straight, are perceived. And in particular, when I talk about gay discrimination, I talk about it in the context of the overall effeminization and dismissal of black manhood in this country. But my point here is that I talk about both. And somehow talking about the plight of straight black men is perceived by many to be a threat to acknowledging the plight of gay black men. And it doesn't need to be, right? So, that whole dynamic in and of itself, I find highly problematic. But while we were on that theme, we got a case. This is actually coming from an article off NBCnews.com. And it's talking about the over 500 LGBTQ candidates to appear on November ballots, shattering records. And so I wanted to get BGS's perspective on this, if you would.
Yeah. This is something that we kind of saw coming under the Obama administration, and it's kind of being transferred to Soros and BLM. So this is a push for certain segments of the population to get power, because there's evidently their year at BLM. So something to look forward to. Now to look forward to be aware of, because you're going to have a lot of anti-male legislation possibly coming through. So a lot more women. A lot more LGBTQI. This is a feminist agenda actually taking power.
Just real quick, first shout out to Dr. Nicole Ali. I think she's in the building, so I wanted to shout her out. People are asking if anybody is on a Bluetooth and if anybody can turn their echo cancellation on in StreamYard. So you guys, maybe that, I don't know. It's just something to try. So you go into your cam mic settings, see if you can click on echo cancellation, see if that does anything.
We can try.
Somebody said BGS sounds like Prince in Purple Rain.
That's a good thing. If I get money in women.
Oh my God. Tracy said there's a terrible echo, but we'll deal with it. All right. So if you guys can check that, we just have to keep it moving. Any comments anybody else wanted to make on this one, Gigi?
I'm gonna talk slow so that you can comprehend what it is I'm saying. Right now, gay is the new black. And I think it's a false analogy, but you know, false equivalence. But that's just how our culture perceives the LGBTQ. I can't even hear myself. But I'm turning the mic down.
Okay. Well, here
I can hear myself, but ultimately, what I said was the gay is the new black, and that it's a false equivalency to compare the plight African Americans with that LGBTQ members.
Okay. Tell you what I want y'all to do. I want you guys to come back.
I don't know.
I want both of you guys to go out and come back in.
That helped.
All right.
Can you hear me, Gigi?
Yeah, we hear you. I'm gonna leave and come back.
Okay, you guys even come back, and then I'll keep going.
Okay.
All right. So we're gonna keep it pushing though.
But Doc, let me just say this. If you can hear me,
I can hear you.
If you were to X out of StreamYard, if you went right back to it, it would still come back. I've done it several times.
How did you fix it?
I mean, I don't know if you could actually fix it, but maybe if you left StreamYard and then came back in, maybe that would help.
All right, hold on.
Can anyone hear? Check. I don't know if you all are still there or not.
All right, I'm back.
Check. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
It's cool now?
Somebody says it's cool.
If they say it's cool, then I guess it's cool. Give me a 1 if everything is good now.
Okay. People are saying they can hear you. Okay. People are saying better. They're saying we good. Go ahead, BGS, say something.
Okay. Can you hear me?
All right.
Okay. We're ready to roll with Rush now, baby.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, he said he told me to get out.
Okay.
I had to get out the show.
Okay.
So we're rolling with Rush right now. That's all we need.
Yeah.
Gigi was holding down my show, so you know.
Oh, you kicked him out too, huh?
No, he kicked me out.
Oh, okay.
How did I kick you out, man? I was on the screen. Look, okay, but now we're good now.
We're good
all
now.
Systems go.
We all
like
go.
Aquatechy says.
I got ones.
Yeah. So ultimately, all I was trying to do was articulate the fact that at the current moment, the people at the cusp or the forefront of the emancipatory or liberatory movement, I guess the higher echelon of the movement towards liberatoriness at the current moment are people who are queer. And so straight black men, of course, are regarded as the white people of black people. So they're regressive by definition.
Yeah.
So there's the centering of queer folk at the current moment and the decentering of people who are considered to be heteronormative.
Right.
And I mean, but that's an assumption, though. There's the assumption that just because someone is heterosexual, that they're innately oppressors to other people. And of course, there's this notion with feminism, especially or particularly black feminism, that if you don't eliminate every system of oppression simultaneously, then you're not actually doing the kind of work that needs to be done to make sure that everyone is free. So I think that's misguided for various reasons, but I'll just leave that there for now.
Okay. All right. Well, this is going to come up, as y'all know, when we get into the main topic. We're not done with this, but we'll come back to it. So this is a piece on Huffington Post, right? Teen who recorded George Floyd's death on phone to receive PEN Award. Right, Darnella Frazier will be honored in December by the Literary and Human Rights Organization for filming the death, at the hands of the Minneapolis police of George Floyd. And they're going to do this in December. And to my understanding, they withheld it so far due to COVID. But they're framing it as with nothing more than a cell phone and sheer guts. Darnella changed the course of history in this country, sparking a bold movement demanding an end to systemic anti-Black racism and violence at the hands of police. 17-year-old will share the Courage Award with Mary Yovanovitch, the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, who was pushed out by the Trump administration. So I put this up here because, shout out to the sister for having the courage to do that. But at the same time, there's something kind of problematic about extending an award for that, especially if anybody paid attention to what happened to the young cat who recorded the death of Eric Garner, who just got out of prison, to my understanding, within the last, it might have been a few weeks for that matter. But this idea of awarding people for this, there's something problematic for me. I have mixed emotions about it, but any thoughts about this from the two of you?
I mean, it's just highlighting, more press. So it's, it happens. Okay. It's a little luck, a little guts. And I don't have a problem with it, but and it probably encourages more people to do it. So in that case, I don't have any problem with it. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't see a big problem with it. It's not the most courageous action in the world, but at the same time, I guess it is to some extent necessary work, given the kind of ways in which Black people are being summarily executed in the streets extrajudicially by law enforcement officers. So somebody has to start recording.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the way it is. They're going to treat women, especially Black women, differently than they do men or Black men. So I know what you're saying, but the thing is that it encourages other people to actually step up and actually at least record, at least document.
Shout out to Aquatechie and Shadow Dog. Appreciate that support. But I think you're hitting on the crux of it. And the other thing that bothered me too is even in what I read a moment ago, where they talk about this as a gesture to, challenge anti-Black racism. We have a problem with saying exactly what the hell it is. This is not just anti-Black racism. This is something that is overwhelmingly particular to men. And I've used this example several times when I talk about, say, breast cancer in the Black community. There's 2 to 4% of breast cancer cases that are men. But we don't talk about breast cancer as a Black issue, as a human issue. We talk about it as a woman's issue. But I notice when it comes to issues that pertain to Black males, especially when the numbers are numbers that actually can be used to, advance policy, somehow it becomes a Black issue, even when it isn't. Now, as far as this whole question of giving awards for filming, only reason I think it sticks out a little bit to me, it's not a major issue. It's not the hill I want to die on. I'm not so upset I can't sleep at night. It's just a minor annoyance because I know whenever I've seen, men, most particularly Black men, who have been recording any of these cases, there's not been any discussion about awards. There's not been any discussions about acknowledgement. So I get that there's going to be some incentivizing done with this, and that's fine. Maybe it's a morally questionable that that's somehow going to motivate people to want to do it more if you win an award. But I don't even think that's the main issue. I think the main issue for me is I've not heard, awards extended or even considered when it comes to, men being involved. And understand, when you're talking about police brutality and other men standing in those spaces recording it, they are now, everybody on one level or another's lives may be threatened. I fully believe that Darnella's life could have been threatened because she was recording. But I'm not going to argue that it was threatened to the same degree that another man could be threatened. And I do think there's a distinction there.
Oh, definitely there's a distinction there.
Somebody's sound go out?
I think my sound may have gone out. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Yeah.
Okay. For the most part, we already know that Black men are the ones who are most subjected to extrajudicial killing by police officers. We know this. And to identify the problem as a problem strictly or mostly suffered by that of Black men is to take away visibility from other demographics, in particular Black women. Let's just be honest about it. So that's why they came up with the hashtag say her name. And look, it's bad when anybody Black gets killed, but let's not lose sight of the fact that it's primarily Black men who are getting killed by police, because Black men are perceived as being the most threatening to white males. Black women are not, for the most part, threatening to white men. They're just not. But Black men are, right? So we just have to be honest about that. But for some reason, it just seems like conceptually, we have to have the Black flat, what you call Black flatness, as it pertains to all of the things. All of the things that happen to Black men happen to everybody. But things that happen to Black women just happen uniquely to Black women. And I think, going forward, we have to have an honest conversation with one another and just say, look, different people experience different kinds of oppression differently, right? And racism is practiced differently to different demographics. It's practiced differently to gay Black men who are visibly gay. It's different, right? And so if we can't make those distinctions, if we can't use that kind of fine tuning in order to, demonstrate that, or to at least acknowledge that fact, then we're going to continue to be mired in, this oppression Olympics, which I don't think gets us anywhere.
Well, we got thanks to T Fitness and Ash. Appreciate the support. We got a number of these that I want to get you guys' perspectives on, but I agree, and I just think it can actually end up impacting and hampering even intra-racial conversations, because again, you've not heard anyone talk about a Black male political agenda anywhere.
No.
In any major way, because the assumption is Black males don't have an agenda that may be separate from what we've heard from the rest of the Black community. But we do have a perspective. What'd you say?
I said even Ice Cube was saying the same thing. He never differentiated Black males from the rest of the community. And the females had an objection to it, that there should be an objection.
Absolutely. Yeah. Shout out to Ashes to Snow. Appreciate that support. All right. So 330 watching. Please, again, like, share, and subscribe. And we are going to keep it moving forward. Some of you may have seen this. Fox9.com. Sisters allegedly hold down, stabbed security guard 27 times after being told to wear masks. Right. This is in Chicago. West Side security guard was allegedly attacked by two sisters he told to wear masks and use hand sanitizers. One of the women holding him by the hair while the other stabbed him more than 24 times. And so now he actually survived, and he held them there long enough for the police to get there. But nonetheless, this is what took place. Apparently, the 6'5", 270-pound security guard reached out to try to grab one of their phones when one of the sisters, upon being asked to wear a mask, threatened to call somebody to come kick his ass. So we're talking about proxy violence. We've talked about that quite a bit on this show. And when he reached out for her phone, apparently the 21-year-old sister, Jessica, picked up a trash can and smashed it in the 32-year-old guard's face. And then during the scuffle, Jessica pulled out what's called a comb knife with a hidden blade and began stabbing the guard in his neck, back, and arms.
Wow.
Yeah. And then the other sister, I guess it's Jayla, assisted by grabbing the guard's hair so he couldn't move. Any immediate reflections, fellas?
A little bit of them teaching women, especially Black women, to be more masculine and more violent, and then COVID-19 actually amplifying all these feelings. So we're getting an amplification of all these ills in society. So I'm not surprised. This is because this happened earlier in the year with, I think it was in Michigan, I do believe.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I can't remember where a woman called her boyfriend, husband, or whatever, and he came with his son. Yeah, and they killed the man. They killed the security guard in the store.
Yeah. So this is kind of similar, but you see a lot of this stuff with them killing babies and killing themselves and fighting, and so it's everybody's under tension, and so the worst in all people, especially Black women, are coming out.
Yeah, this just confirms my belief. But I mean, this is just one example, but I mean, there are many. Women are fallible just like men are fallible. Women can be violent and as nasty and as vicious as any man can. in a variety of different kinds of ways. And so, for some reason, we have this preconceived notion that women are the fairer sex, that they're sugar and spice and everything nice. But I mean, again and again and again, we see examples of women behaving badly.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's difficult for us in this culture and in this society to get over the women are wonderful effect. Women are human beings.
Well, it's interesting. Go ahead, G.
I was going to say, I was just watching, I think it was on Facebook, where there's a flight to Puerto Rico where they landed, that there was a couple of black women from New York fighting like a whole group of men in Puerto Rico. They on a plane just going at it. They had to break them up and sit the sisters down and separate them. They still wanted to fight.
Well, it's interesting because the notion that Gigi was talking about women being sugar and spice was a Western notion. And yet what I find is when it's convenient, there's no complaint about certain Western notions of gender. But when it comes to black men, there seems to be quite a few. Now this one I'm going to extend it to BGS to lead off on, but this is Republicans weaponizing white motherhood to get Amy Coney Barrett confirmed. This is out of Huffington Post. And they describe it as a devoted mother, a woman of faith, a nice white lady. How bad could she be? So they talked about her being announced and made nominee for Associate Justice of the Supreme Court on September 26th. Trump praised her intellect, her credentials, and her legal accomplishments. They describe her as more than a stellar scholar and a judge. She's also a profoundly devoted mother. Her family is a core part of who Amy is. So it's an interesting kind of way they frame her here.
Yeah, does she have like a couple of adopted black children? If I'm not mistaken.
He couldn't write this any better on Lovecraft.
Exactly. I think she has a couple of adopted black children, and they were trying to frame her as highly conservative, right? And then and racist. And then they show her a picture of her with a couple of black children and says, how could she be racist if she's a white mother to a couple of black children? Yeah, well, they did perfectly.
They said she's poised to be one of the most conservative judges on an already conservative Supreme Court at 48. She will likely be serving for decades. Her legal ideology and personal views are concerned to many advocates for women's rights, LGBT rights, immigrant rights, racial justice. In her personal life, she has ties to People of Praise, I guess, which is supposed to be some kind of fringe Christian group. And they said she previously served on the board of private white schools, private Christian schools. I don't know where I slipped up on that term, that effectively barred LGBT teachers and children of LGBT parents. So they're kind of framing it that way, and they're suggesting her voting record also raises red flags for this group. She's a conservative record on abortion rights and immigration, and she once ruled against a black man who claimed he had been subjected to racially hostile work environment, which included his boss calling him the N-word directly. She also has said she considers herself an originalist, which means she believes the Constitution must be interpreted in the way it was meant when it was written.
Okay.
Any other thoughts?
That is conservative. But the thing is that, they did that to soften her image by calling her a decent white mother. And especially with the black children and stuff like that. So kudos to them. Okay.
Yeah,
I think Gigi over there laughing too.
No, man. I mean, look, there's no secret that the left and the right are involved in cultural wars. As it pertains to economic issues, I think that the left and the right are pretty much on the same, playing field. But they're different as it pertains to social issues. So the conservatives, they like traditional mononuclear families. They don't have a problem with heteronormativity. And but the people on the left have embraced the LGBTQ movement. I mean, of course, you got people who are conservative in the LGBTQ also. However, I mean, the further right you go, and we all know that somewhere around the 80s, that the conservatives or the Republican Party embraced the religious right. So this is just a manifestation, a current incarnation of the religious right. And these people trying to pack the court in order to wage their form of cultural war.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So moving forward, I don't know if you guys had a chance to see this one. This was a brief exchange between Jermaine Dupri and Kamala Harris about her record. And Dupree makes the argument. He actually states, you put a lot of black brothers away in your post addressing Harris, in your past, excuse me, asking Harris to address her record. And her response was, yes, I was a prosecutor. I decided to go into a system that I knew was flawed to reform it. Yes, I decided to go up the rough side of the mountain, as we say in church. And then she says, I created this whole initiative focused on young men who were young adult men arrested for drug sales to give them jobs and support. Then I dismissed the charges against them.
Really?
Yeah.
We talk about rewriting history. That is Feminist 101, huh?
Well, one of my Facebook friends made an interesting observation. Shout out to Sean. He said, interesting, she said young men, not young black men, in response to the question, which may be a political dance around. I'm not sure, but, you know, I'll leave that to you two.
Yeah, basically she was, I guess after they fought fires and they were signed off to actually do work, you know, for private corporations, I guess they were free to go, huh?
All right. Well,
yeah, I mean, that's, you know, come on, man. Let's be honest, man. This woman is, you know, a draconian as it pertains to punishment. So, I mean, you know, why not just own it? And why not just say, look, I made some mistakes and try to walk it back? But instead, you know, she equivocated.
Yeah,
So,
you have two people running for the White House. They're trying to pass themselves off as liberals, and they're not.
And that's the funny thing, because even though, as I said before, that there's cultural wars between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party as it pertains to people who consider themselves to be leftists or liberal, and people who consider themselves to be conservative and rightists. The liberal part, there's a part of the liberal Democratic Party that has increasingly been moving towards the right. I consider Obama to be, you know, just like Bush. I mean, the older Bush.
Oh yeah.
You know, I mean, there's no significant difference in my viewpoint than you know, George, not W, but Herbert Walker. I mean, Herbert George H. Bush, I think.
Yeah.
So,
Poppy.
Yeah, Big Papa. So, you know, but it's easy to be hard on black men because, you know, for the most part, black men are the ones who are incarcerated the most. They're punished the most. So this is just punish black men, and nobody finds fault in that. I mean, but increasingly, you begin to see pushback on that since Michelle Alexander wrote that book, The New Jim Crow. So everybody's was in a scurry to try to, you know, clean up their participation in, you know, this mass incarceration project. But she was part of that project, man, and she needs to just own it.
She was. Yeah. They both were, which is why it's a negative thing. Because I was actually looking at Biden in '89, trying to push the crime bill through, and he actually said the Republicans weren't tough enough back then.
Yeah, I mean, and it was Bill Clinton wanted to demonstrate, because he's a Dixiecrat to me. That's what Clinton was to me. Okay, he's a Southern Democrat, and so he did the dog whistling in order to get the votes from the right. You know, to get white people to vote for him. I mean, that was his way, and that was his wife's way of consolidating the win. So, I mean, they played racial politics, and he also attacked workfare. And then another thing that Kamala Harris did was she put black mothers in prison.
Yes, she did.
For their kids being truant.
Yeah. Which is somehow being swept under the rug in this zeitgeist of trying to get a black woman in office. And I found it an interesting contradiction. But real quick, shout out to DH for becoming a member. Appreciate that. We're going to move a little forward. This one is pretty big right now. It's been taking over the last couple of days in the news, as it should. This has to do with the current situation going on in Philadelphia. At the killing of one Walter Wallace Jr., 27 years old, who actually, suffered from some form of mental illness. You can see in this situation here, he comes out with a knife. times.
Oh shit! Oh my god!
That's his mother right there.
Oh, they just killed them in front of me. Oh,
right.
Yo.
So we're seeing from that, right, uprisings taking place all throughout Philadelphia, and up to what I guess was the latest report, 50 officers were injured in response to people, rising up. So, any observations, reflections, fellas?
It's, that is one reason why, when something like that happens, you're supposed to call for backup and get more officers there. But the thing is, an unarmed black man being shot by two cops, you're supposed to be able to deal with physicalness. You're supposed to be trained. I think Officer Faulkner says the reason that a lot of people get shot is because a lot of officers never been in a real fight, and the first thing they go to is their gun.
Right, because this looked like a classic taser situation to me.
Yeah.
But it's. Oh, go ahead, Gigi.
No, man. I mean, look, man. There's a sociologist by the name of Paul Hirschfield, and basically what he's done is he's compiled like an exhaustive record of civilians killed by U.S. police, and then he compared it to what happens in European countries.
Yeah.
And basically the rates of police killings in the U.S. are disproportionately high. I mean, bottom line, for example, in England and Wales in 2015, just because this is old data, right? Only 55 fatal police shootings have occurred within the past 24 years. Whereas 59 fatal police shootings occurred in the United States over the first 24 days of 2015.
Right.
So you got to think about that, man.
Yeah.
So police officers in the United States are trained to kill. And it's almost as if they have free license to kill black men. And,
but see, what's interesting is I'm even seeing this in the comment sections. People are saying, well, he had a knife. Yeah, he had a knife. And I think that speaks to the importance of what Gigi is bringing up, because he's talking about in other countries how they handle situations that may even include having weapons, but handle them in a non-lethal way. This is the reason you have tasers. You know what I mean? Where you can actually have a variety of responses to a particular incident. But we've grown so accustomed to black male death, and again, we're talking about someone who apparently suffered from a mental illness. If I understand the story correctly, the mother pointed that out, beforehand. So this is not something they didn't know. So yes, in the video, you can see him walking out into the street holding the knife outward. But you're telling me that at least 3 police officers didn't have another method?
Yeah, I mean, so like this sociologist, Paul Hirschfield, basically essentially says this. You got 2 prevailing reasons why this could be the case, right? So the first reason is that elevated police killings are rooted in America's prevailing ideology and mythology of self-reliance and limited government. So we're talking about like the Wild West colonial settler mentality, where you take justice into your own hands and you solve problems related not related, but you solve problems by means of violence, right? And the police, of course, given that they have a blank check to kill, I mean, what's qualified immunity other than a blank check to kill, while in the course of performing your duty as a peace officer. But then the other reason that he mentions or states is that police violence is a tool and a product of strategies to maintain racial segregation and inequality. And in my viewpoint, it's both. Okay, so you got a way by which to manage the black population and to let them know where they stand in the dominance hierarchy, and then at the same time you have this prevailing ideology of limited government and people taking justice into their own hands. And the police even think this way. I mean, these guys are like sheriffs at high noon in the middle of June in some town where tumbleweeds are, blowing,
And plus guns are a religion in the United States, and they always have been.
Well, we're definitely looking at more than guns, and we're looking at the connection too with vigilante violence. But this is something that popped up in the news that I think is important for us, particularly as Black men, to re-examine. This has happened several times this year, right? This is the vigil in Sacramento, to demand answers for a Black man being found hanging at a Sacramento basketball court. Right? Family and friends gathered at a candlelight vigil in Countryside Community Park in South Sacramento on Friday, October 23rd, to demand an FBI investigation for Willie Brown Jr., father of 4, found hanging on a basketball court rim at the park on Monday. I've heard a number of these cases this year, especially in the last 7 months, where people have been wondering and debating as to whether or not these were suicide attempts. But the other ones involved hanging by rope, which I've argued in the past is not even something the last 2 generations have a whole lot of familiarity with in terms of ropes. But hanging from a basketball court rim.
But how was he hanging from the court rim? By a rope?
I'm sure, but they didn't. I don't have a lot of detail in this. This is in sacb.com. You can find this and check it out. But I just found it interesting. It's another case of a Black male hanging, and you notice how there's not much discussion about the last 5.
No, there was a big thing about the 2 in Southern California that were like weeks apart.
Right.
In I think one in Lancaster, if I'm not mistaken, and then one a little further up. There was 2 of them like within 2 weeks. I know there was one in I believe in Florida and one in Portland. They had been talked about. I think the one in Florida, the man's hands were tied behind his back, and he had bite marks all over his body.
Look here, man. Let me just say something real quick. I'm an iron worker, right? And so as an iron worker, I had to learn how to tie knots. And man, let me tell you, man, most Black people don't know how to tie knots. I mean, how many Black people know what a bowling is, what a clove hitch is, a half hitch, a figure 8 knot, a granny knot, or a running knot, a bowling with a bend. People don't know these things. Right. So these young Black men all of a sudden have developed skills.
You see that?
To tie knots, right, such that they can hang themselves in public. And first of all, let me just say this: with the history of death by lynching in America, one of the last ways that a Black man is going to try to kill himself is by hanging himself, man.
Right.
That's just my viewpoint on it. Now, that's just speculation. It's conjecture. But I mean, come on, man. Of all the ways to kill yourself, that would be the way that Black men decide to do so. I think not, man.
And always immediately these things are actually considered a suicide.
Right. And most people when they're trying to commit that are not looking to suffer to any great extent. And that is a possibility with rope. But anyway, the fact that these are still happening, I gotta call attention to them because I notice how quickly they go away in the news. And if they make the news at all, there's very little fanfare. It comes in, goes out. And there's no, I haven't heard any massive statement made, but not only in regard to this one in Sacramento, but how many we've seen this year and what that speaks to. But we can go ahead and move forward. This is an interesting one. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, you can go on YouTube and actually listen to this interview. This is Judge Joe Brown talking about Tina Turner. And he's not talking about Tina Turner from, something he read. He's talking about Tina Turner and her behavior as somebody who knew Tina and Ike at a very young age. He talked about going over to their house. He talked about spending time. He talked about, seeing Ike around the neighborhood, I believe in Los Angeles.
Yes. And
how Ike would meet with young Black men, impromptu, buy them food, talk to them, so on and so forth. And from there, he talked about the way Tina would actually be the one to be the aggressor, the abuser in many different situations. He described her not as an insult, but as an actual practitioner, that he describes her as a pimp in terms of what she's actually done with women. And so he even talks about conversations he's had with Ike about the portrayal of Ike by Tina in her book, which apparently the movie What's Love Got to Do with It was based on. And even if you go into Wikipedia and look up the film, they have a whole list of things that were exaggerated or reframed in the film, things that didn't even occur. But according to this conversation, with Judge Joe Brown, he actually talks about the malignment of Ike Turner, to kind of push this agenda, particularly in the 1980s, of black women along this black feminist agenda, black women as victims of black men as abusive patriarchs and toxic men. Of course, that term wasn't being used in the 80s, but if anybody is the face of toxic masculinity in the black community, we can argue about a number, but Ike would be in the top 5, right? And Judge Joe Brown actually, it says from personal experience that it's actually the opposite. It wasn't Ike that was the abuser. It was more often than not Tina. I don't know if either one of you had a chance to listen to this at all, but I just wanted to kind of put that there.
I did listen to it. And like I said, when I was coming up, because like I said, I knew a couple of the Turner sons, and I was never aware of any violence in the family, but things people keep it quiet.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, they were married for years in a very ritzy part of Black LA.
Right.
So when What Love's Got to Do It came out, I was kind of shocked. Like, I'd never heard of Ike being that violent, and I'm in LA, and I'm in in that part of Los Angeles, and he was like that, because you heard about people that did stuff like Jim Brown. Everybody knew about Jim Brown. Everybody knew about OJ. Okay, that he could be violent. But the thing is, I never heard anything about Ike and Tina Turner.
Okay.
Yeah, well, my thoughts on it are, nobody knows what the truth is except for those two people, or people who were actually witnessed. Now, this guy is coming out and saying he saw some things. I have no reason to believe that he would be lying. But, man, ultimately, man, we have a problem with talking about domestic violence by means of social science. We talk about domestic violence in relation to how feminists portray domestic violence, and they have one etiology for it, or one correlation related to that phenomenon, namely the patriarchy or male dominance. And we've already gone through this on so many different occasions, but the very person who created the Duluth model, Ellen Pence, wrote a paper in a journal called Community Solutions to Domestic Violence. And the name of the article is called Some Thoughts on Philosophy. And in that, I think the publication was published in 98, if my memory serves me correctly. But in that article, she admits that we were engaged in confirmation bias. We wanted to make men guilty, even though men testified that they did not get engaged in these kind of, acts for the purpose of dominating women at all. But now we know that for the most part, the bulk of domestic violence is what they call reciprocal or bivalent domestic violence. But still,
bidirectional,
but this country, is still mired in the Duluth model, even though the person who developed the Duluth model pointed out its weaknesses.
And we're gonna come back to it, especially probably a couple of times tonight. Because that issue I want you to hold on to, because we're not done with it. But moving forward, this is something I think is important, whether we recognize it or not. It's an article in The Guardian. America's protests crackdown 5 months after George Floyd. Hundreds face trials and prison, right? So some protesters face stacked charges and threats of deportation. Others have been charged with police assault with no reports of injuries. This is an image here of Lee Percy Christian III, who didn't think Arizona law enforcement could stop him from protesting until they locked him up indefinitely.
Wow.
Earlier this month, Christian 27 was arrested for unlawful assembly after a Black Lives Matter protest in Phoenix and jailed without bond because of outstanding charges from previous demonstrations. Prosecutors later suggested bond be set at $100,000.
Wow.
Christian's lawyer and a judge agreed that he could be released on a lower bond if he didn't participate in future public protests. Christian was mortified, agreed to sign away his right to protest so he could leave jail. He spent 9 days. He had spent 9 days locked up. I'm guilty until proven innocent, he said recently on the phone. We're in a police state, and the last thing the police want is for me to be out there using my voice. And so since then, since George Floyd, millions of Americans have marched in cities big and small to protest racial violence. The demonstrations have been overwhelmingly nonviolent, yet in many jurisdictions, law enforcement has responded with force. Tens of thousands of demonstrators, activists, and BLM supporters have been arrested. More than 5 months since the last start of the unrest, hundreds of these protesters have been slapped with serious charges by federal and local prosecutors. This is something that I was talking about before. I talked about a past experience I had with an associate who was in BLM, and she would talk about on a regular basis getting arrested and then being out in time to cook dinner for the kids and things of that nature. And this was around the same time in the last few years, and it resurged again this year, where I heard in those same conversations, this kind of idea that Black men were cowardly in regard to protest. And one of the things I've been pushing is that it's not about first of all, Black men have been involved in protest, since the beginning. That's never changed. Black men are still involved in protest. However, what we don't want to talk about is that Black men have a different experience with protest. And this case here, where you see this fairly young brother, Lee Percy Christian, is an example of what Black men are concerned about. Because if I get arrested at a protest, I am not confident that I am getting out in time to cook my son dinner. I am not confident that I'm getting out anytime soon or getting out alive. Those are things that most Black men can't take for granted. And I think it's part of the discussion that nobody wants to have. And for some reason, we keep skipping over, which is that we have a different experience with protest altogether. But any thoughts?
Oh, yeah. In fact, I think there was a BLM protester in New York that protested, and he got charged for actually using a bullhorn in a cop's head or a cop's ear, where said the cop's hearing was actually damaged. And for that, they sent 12 officers in a canine unit after him in his apartment to pull him out the next day.
Right.
So it's a completely different reaction between women and men.
Absolutely. Very different reaction. Okay. Let's see here.
These next two. Hold on, man. I had some thoughts about that.
Go ahead, man.
I'm sorry, man. I had my microphone on mute and I was trying to speak, but I really couldn't do it. But look, man. You got people from Ferguson who have been killed over protests, man. You know, and they were all men.
Yes.
So
burned alive in their cars.
Right. So while 3 have died from not self-reported, but reported suicides, and 3 others mysteriously died. So then the question becomes, well, why? Why is there no investigation into this matter any further? Well, we know why, because the cases have been closed, right? But there's a particular danger associated with being a Black man and engaging in protests, and it's quite different from that of Black women. Black women get to, they get deals with Warner Brothers. Black men, they get the jail cell of death. And so there's a lot different. There's a lot different, man, for Black men than what it is for Black women when it pertains to protests. It just is, man. We have to admit these things. But you got to have the right persuasion,
and gender, gender.
But that's what I mean when I say persuasion, because right now that's just as much currency as whiteness to me. I'm just being real right now.
And especially since you've seen them on the cover of time.com, right? As the moral, kind of moral compass of the country. And what was the phrase that went with that? If you support Black women, you uplift them, you uplift everybody. But there's no accompanying term for the men who are dying most.
Society can rise no higher than its woman.
Right.
Yeah. Or if Black women are free, everyone else will be free, because all oppression will be lifted by default. My suspicion tells me, okay, well, if that's the case, then why is there not a commensurate or correlative amount of freedom being experienced by Black men as Black women rise through the ranks?
And that's the crux of the issue, most particularly here on the Onyx Report. That's the crux of it,
Because if it's the case, if that's truly the case, then we should be seeing attendant levels of well-being experienced by black men concurrent with that of black women.
Mm-hmm.
But but let's just be honest. This is a certain caliber of black woman, and with a certain kind of education,
Right.
and with a certain kind of background, with a certain kind of lifestyle, and those women are the ones who are advanced. Maybe not even the bulk of women, sharing those benefits. But I digress, man. Let me let you move forward, bro.
Oh man, I appreciate it. And, that's what I definitely wanted to put forward. I wanted to share this. This is something I ran across on a website, reading through an article the other day, and it talks about, as you can see, this is a Dove soap ad, right? And it talks about race-based hair discrimination. Now I've told people over and over again that I have a piece on newblackmasculinities.wordpress.com that deals with black men and hair discrimination. But one of the things I see happening in this piece is this aligning of hair discrimination strictly with black women. Right? And so one of the things I said is I understand that Dove prioritizes women, but still people have wedded hair discrimination to black women to the detriment of black boys and men in a very problematic way, especially when you factor in this kind of corporate involvement, these type of philanthropic media gestures that tend to come with resources and grants and business support. I think what it ends up doing is gentrifying the community in a very particular way, especially on gendered grounds, right? And as I posted this, I actually had a supporter bring up something that I had not considered. She actually brought up an accompanying, hold on, let me see if I can get this over here. Right. She brought up an accompanying, kind of profile. So apparently Dove does have a men's care line, right, where they talk explicitly about black men in particular, and they talk about the need for trust me, it ain't reparations. I meant representation. They talk about the need for better representation for black men, but it's interesting they don't talk about anything related to hair discrimination or discrimination in general in long terms of men. So it's a very interesting bifurcated discussion where for women, we're dealing with victimization, we're dealing with the ways that they're held back by society, and for men, talk about representation. But when you actually look through the history, most particularly of lawsuits in regard to hair discrimination, black men have had a long history of protesting their treatment, especially when you talk about things like military and police. And one of the differences, and I've said this several times, that black men experience in regard to hair discrimination has to do with wearing beards and the degree to which shaving every day is not something that many black men can do without severe skin irritation as a repercussion. So that said, there have been many kinds of employment, many different types of employment where black men have come up face to face with these issues. And yet, when we talk about hair discrimination, it's not something that people even associate. It's interesting, even black men who experience it don't experience it as hair discrimination. I'll give you an example. One brother, one of the first responses I got to posting this in Facebook, one brother said, I think he said, I live in Arizona and I couldn't get a job and I cut my locks and then I got a job. Temp job, but I got a job right away.
Right.
Now, most black folk would say, absolutely, cut your locks, conform, get a job right away. I'm not going to argue one way or the other. You got to do what you got to do. But what I find interesting is that is a classic example of hair discrimination for black men.
Right.
We don't process it as hair discrimination. We just say, cut your hair and get a job. Now, I'm not judging what you do one way or the other, but I'm just noticing, I'm observing how quickly we can dance over hair discrimination in regard to men. But on the other end of the spectrum, we can have a critical dialogue as long as we leave it associated with black women. Any thoughts?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's I think we don't make a fuss out of it is because as far as discrimination and racism, that's kind of way, way, way down on the list. Whereas women don't experience the same kind of racism in America that we do. This is high on the list for them. So how they look and how they're perceived is actually very high. Whereas a black man, our mere safety, in a racist society, actually is really high on the list. So it's just about priorities. But the thing is that if they really want to be equal, they should have been men on that list too.
Absolutely. Gigi?
we had a conversation about this when it came to black male privilege, and you mentioned it, PFB, pseudo barbillate folliculitis. And for the most part, man, you know, I don't suffer from that kind of ailment. You know, I kind of got like a baby face. I'm just being honest. You know, I don't grow hair except for like a goatee. But I can imagine that would be like, you know, painful, man. You know, and then at one point I was growing dreadlocks, and I decided to cut them off again for the reasons that you just mentioned, because people, especially after Lil Wayne started growing dreadlocks, this is like, you know, it's a thug aesthetic now, some people would say. And so you know, all the little young hip guys are doing it. So you know, but I think it's a good look. I mean, I was doing it because, you know, I wanted to kind of like tie it to my own spirituality and, you know, Bob Marley and all that. But, you know, but people should be able to wear their hair how they want to. People should be able to express their bodies how they want to. And it's unfortunate that, you know, black men are policed by their hair. They are, you know. So yeah, we suffer from this. We suffer from that as well.
And in case you don't know what PFB looks like, there you go. All right. So we've seen black men with this.
Yeah, that's a very bad case of it too.
Absolutely. And it's common. We've seen this a lot in the community, right? But anyway, so moving forward, I told you we were going to come back to this question of abuse. Many of you may have seen this piece where you have quarterback Terrell Pryor gets probation in plea deal. And basically what happened here is that he was attacked by the woman he's still seeing, right? He was stabbed several times, apparently taken to the hospital, had to have surgery. He had to plead to lower charges. She got 2 years probation, as this was framed as some form of, you know, bidirectional abuse. So he was hospitalized November 3rd, 2019, after being stabbed in the dispute. Pittsburgh police described it as mutual. And yet, what I find interesting is this is an NFL player who is apparently in a mutual abusive situation with an intimate partner. And he's the one in the hospital getting surgery. He's an NFL player, though. She doesn't have any injuries and gets 2 years probation. You know, strange. Interesting, right?
You about to make me curse for this, man. I mean, you know,
female privilege.
Yeah, man. I mean, this is just the Duluth model on steroids. And you know, the NFL has taken this stance that, you know, they're going to prevent women from being abused, and so domestic violence is not really actually bi-directional violence in these people's minds. Well, put it this way: domestic violence is violence against women.
Right.
This is how it's framed.
Right.
And it's a tragedy that it's framed that way because, man, you have video after video after video where you see men being assaulted by women, being chased down the street with knives, you know, being punched, even being hit by a car, lying in a pool of blood, being spit on, hit with a bumper. Like,
with a bumper.
Yeah, I mean, you know, this is crazy to me that we can't confront the reality behind this phenomenon. And it's all predicated upon, let's just be honest, it's predicated upon the idea of Victorian womanhood. Namely that, and it's all centered around white women. But of course, it applies to all women in this culture. And, you know, brother Ron O'Neill and I, man, were talking about this yesterday. Man, these laws impact black men more heavily than they impact any other demographic. You know, because dung rolls downhill. Who are the ones who are going to be confronting these kind of cases and don't have the capacity or the wherewithal to defend themselves against it, right? Or to even know how to defend themselves against it, or to even know the language, or to even have resources of help, you know, in order to deal with these kind of crazy situations that black men find themselves in. And I said this before: if you don't punish a behavior, or if you don't blame a behavior, then what you do is you give sanction to that behavior. You're enabling the behavior. And so you're going to continue to see this. This is why I really don't think people in this culture are really actually trying to mitigate this problem as much as they're trying to find a means by which to scapegoat men for the problem.
And also notice in the last few months just how many athletes in particular have been dealing with this very situation. But so, and now I'm bringing this up too because I had a brother reach out to me just last night, and he was telling me that his girls abuse. Now he's an athlete, and he's saying I'm on the verge of going to jail.
Mm-hmm.
That's it, hands shaking. And he reached out to me and he said, Doc, I don't know what to do. I don't want to go to jail, but I'm at that point. And so I had to kind of tell him, look, at this point, you're going to have to just pull away. You're going to have to find another way to get away from her and not allow yourself to go there. Because the wrong decision in 30 seconds can change your life. You can spend the rest of your life in prison over 30 seconds of rage, and it's just not worth the cost. So I'm posting this particular one not only to talk about it in regard to how Black men experience it, but to also say to any of you out there, if you find yourself in a situation with an abusive woman, knowing full well that if you respond even to half the degree she has, she's been violent with you, you're more than likely the one that's going to go to jail. And so I'm saying it's not worth it. Leave. Man. I did a whole show with attorney Dennis Sperling, especially if you're married. You can go back and listen to that where he gives you strategies on how you can navigate the situation. But at the end of the day, I just want to appeal to Black men who are living this. And see, here's the other problem. Many of us have grown up seeing this in to one degree or another. So this is not strange to many of us. As a matter of fact, I would argue that there are plenty of us that actually believe this is normal.
Yeah.
This is acceptable. I mean, even the old players in the neighborhood used to just describe when I would, ask them questions about things like this, they'd be like, oh, that's just how women act. Like, word? That's just how they act?
Yeah. Yeah. They little girls start out that way, man, when like 6, 7, 8 with actually violence toward their male, the counterparts, because it's accepted. In other words, what the first thing they say, if a girl hits you, don't hit her back, right?
Right.
So like you said, so like Gigi was saying, that gives license to this kind of behavior. And I think instead of curtailing violence, actually emboldening women actually engage in more violence because they don't think they're going to be hurt.
Well, there's no repercussions. Yeah.
No repercussions. Yeah.
Not even legally or in terms of law enforcement. So you're not going to get repercussions from the man in question unless, he just is pushed past his line. Yeah. But for the most part, most men really try to avoid it because they know the repercussions are going to be extreme on their end.
Yeah.
So there are no repercussions there. And then there are often no legal repercussions, law enforcement or, legal in terms of court. And so, of course, this behavior is emboldened when you haven't had to suffer for it.
Yeah. Like I said, the video I saw with the 2 women on the plane in Puerto Rico. Now they're in Puerto Rico in a macho society, and you have basically 2 black women, 2 small black women actually taking on like 5 or 6 Latino men. I mean, just they were actually the aggressors. They were trying to jump over men to actually get to the guy they wanted to get to, and they felt justified. Like it was their fault, like it was the man's fault. And the first thing they said, I was actually looking at the comments. They said, well, there's no reason you should hit a woman, even though it's clearly that this woman was ultra violent.
And look, man, look. Let me just say this: there's no reason for anybody to hit anybody, especially if they're involved in an intimate partner relationship. But the very idea that we don't have the concepts and we don't have the capacity or the aptitude at the current moment to make sense of this kind of phenomenon other than to say, well, a man should never touch a woman. That's bullshit, man. I mean, I hate to say this, Dr. Johnson, on your show. I apologize for using that epithet. But look, here's the deal, man. 1/3 of the people who die from domestic violence are men. Literally die from this, man. So don't talk to men about what they should do or what they shouldn't do or what they should never do. Women come after men with knives, and guns,
far more,
and
women
cars.
Oh yes.
So this notion that men should just sit idly back, there's never a reason to ever harm a woman. I mean, this is absolute ridiculousness. I just don't. It's idiocy, man. To me, it's idiocy. That's the right word. But I mean,
I got you both ways. I was feeling you on idiocy. Shit.
I mean, but the point is, at the current moment, we have normalized, like BGS said, we've normalized women behaving uncontrollably, and it's as if they can't do any harm to men. And then what we do is we reduce this kind of violence to only physical harm as well, and not even paying any attention at all to the kind of psychological and the emotive impacts that this could have on any person.
Right.
So it just shows you men are perceived as disposable. Men are perceived as having to be rational and in control, whereas women can be out of control and engaged in outrageous behavior. But this is the very stereotypes that we're supposed to be breaking with feminism, right? Yeah. But only when they work to advantage of the female demographic.
Well, and it's especially problematic if you've grown up seeing this and you seek it out. And this is why, I'm also a proponent of therapy. I think in many ways there are things there's a lot of trauma in the Black community that's unresolved. But the part of the trauma that men experience that nobody talks about is being on the receiving end of abuse and or growing up being witness to it in households and not getting any therapy about that. And then growing up and finding women who act the same way. And so as you can see in this particular story with Pryor, he's still with the woman. I guess her last name is Briston, but he's still with her. They're still romantically involved. It's stated in the article, right? So, but the last one up for the night, I thought you guys might have some fun with this one, is blame Black men. Right, this is a hashtag that's been going for the last at least week, if not a little bit more. This is Terrain Walker's post. We saw him on my show a few weeks ago, and he posted on Black men dancing in 2020 caused the San Francisco earthquake in 1906. And these were the kind of statements being made in the hashtag blame Black men, because it's become quite the practice. Again, it's been consistent. It's been happening for years, but it's got a resurgence since Ice Cube's dialogue with, the Republicans and this whole question of a contract for Black America that, apparently influenced Trump's platinum plan. And from there, I've heard no one talk about the actual plan that Cube has put on the table. I've heard them talking about Cube as an individual and as an extension of Black men as a whole, and the vitriol he's getting. And apparently it seems like it's already being set up that if Trump wins, it is somehow Black men's fault via Ice Cube and Black male conservatism. And we have these, Black men just want to emulate white men like Trump. All of these kinds of narratives that are coming out. And what it spawned, among other things, is this hashtag blame Black men, which in certain instances has been hilarious. But I don't know if any of you have had a chance to see any of these. Did you run across any?
Man, let me. I've run across them, but the strangest thing just happened to me, man.
What's that?
I just got a text, right? Because I'm getting all these Democratic Party texts because of the election and all this kind of stuff. So what I just saw was, when Black women lead, we all win. Join our panel and hear from Black women on the front lines of the election tonight. I mean, right now, this is the way I feel about it, man. People who have the aptitude to lead should lead. In virtue of you having a uterus, it has no bearing on whether or not you are a capable leader. The same way with men having a penis. It doesn't mean that you are actually, innately meant to be a leader. But the idea, though, that Black women are going to lead us to the promised land, while at the same time browbeating us, defaming our characters, being intellectually dishonest and disingenuous about a whole host of phenomena that's taking place in the Black community and the interaction between men and women, that's not leadership, man. That's deception, and that's participation in the management and control of a certain segment of the Black population. That's how I perceive that. But as it pertains to Black men, I put one out there. I said, you can blame Black men for putting the seeds in watermelon.
I wasn't ready for that.
I wouldn't either.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to spit them seeds out if it wasn't for Black men, man.
Oh my goodness, this is ridiculous.
Look. This is how I view leadership. if you have the capacity to lead, you have the knowledge related to lead in a specific area, you should lead. That should be the criterion of whether or not you should lead. Your demographic, as it pertains to, you know, what your sex is, your race is, your sexuality is, that doesn't give you any you know, insights on how to lead.
Mm-hmm.
But right now we're involved in this movement whereby I think common sense is not common anymore.
Right.
You know, just because a person has a vagina or a uterus doesn't mean that she's going to be a good leader any more than a man having testicles and a penis is going to make him, you know, innately a good leader.
Mm.
So I just don't understand, like, why common sense is not common as it pertains to this issue. I just don't get
it. All right. Well, tonight we're going to move very, very quickly. You guys know I've been talking about this for some time now, the Black Male Political Agenda. We only have one new edition, and it is actually an addendum. So we're only going to spend a second on it. I'm putting the link to the agenda in the comments on YouTube, you know, for those who haven't had a chance to peruse them in a while. One of the top issues, the top major issues in the Black Male Political Agenda, matter of fact, it comes up as the first category in the agenda, is family court reform. And just as an aside note, if you want to understand male voting patterns in the next decade, probably in the last few years as well, think about which political candidates are even amenable to conversations that men want to have, most particularly in regard to things like family court. You know what I mean? And and it may help you understand just a slight aspect of how men are voting. But in this regard, one of the things that we can talk about, right, and is one of the first bullet points you find in the Black Male Political Agenda. I think it's actually the second one. So let me put it up here. All right. And if you go to it, like I said, family court reform is the first thing on there. 50-50 child custody is the first bullet point. The second one is mandatory paternity testing at birth, right? And this is to protect men who are, you know, being misled and forced into fatherhood for children that aren't theirs. But when we talk about the newest addition to this, we're talking about this idea here that once determined that the father has been misled regarding the child's parentage, no matter how long it's been, right? Anytime in that 18-year period, he should be excused from both the birth certificate if he's already signed. And this, of course, applies to those who don't have the access to paternity testing at birth, since that's not a practice yet in terms of a legal one. He should be excused from both the birth certificate and child support. And the exploited party should be subject to reimbursement either from the mother, the actual biological father, or the state. Right. So this is something that was associated with, point 1B, but it needed to have some further embellishment in terms of the protections in place, because there aren't any really for men now. You can find out that you've been lied to for 18 years about whether or not you've parented a child that you've supported, raised, and maybe even, financed in terms of pushing them into higher education. And yet, as a matter of fact, even if it's found out and you go to court, you're still responsible. You're still considered the parent on file. You're still considered liable. So just this real quick edition, we're not going to go into any great length into the Black Male Political Agenda. Like I said, go to the website. I put it in the comment section, review it, share it, get it out there, because you're not going to find a Black Male Political Agenda anywhere. This is actually the agenda that Ice Cube has actually been attacked over, even though this is not what he wrote. He didn't write anything male specific or female specific. He wrote it specific to the Black community, and he was attacked as if he wrote a Black Male Political Agenda. Well, we here at the Onyx Report, 11,000 members strong, actually have written a Black Male Political Agenda. So we want all the smoke. But fellas, any thoughts about these?
It had gotten so bad at one point that if you were just merely dating a woman with a child and you became sort of like the child's father figure, there's been cases where they made you pay child support. That's how bad it's gotten, because the state needs women to produce children, and they want to put all the burden on men. So they don't care who it is. If you're a warm body with a job and a paycheck, they will recruit you. And I think if you to actually file paternity fraud or something like that. If you don't, say if you sign a birth certificate, or even if you don't sign a birth certificate, you got 2 years to actually file for a paternity suit. And if not, basically your statute of limitations actually filed is over for most states.
Any thoughts on this, Gigi?
Yeah, man, I think it's the most terrible thing in the world, man, to mislead a person, to lie to a person to begin with, about anything, you know, but to lie to a person about something as significant as, you know, somebody being a father to a child that they're not really the father of, that's absolutely absurd, man. And the fact that we've normalized this, even legalized this, you know,
it's a joke.
It's a tragedy, man. And it's men that are doing this. You know, you know, how would they feel if they found out that the people who they've sired or thought that they sired were not theirs? Think about the hurt and the pain that would cause. First of all, it's a betrayal because of a lie. Then it's a betrayal because of cheating, or, you know, typically that's the situation, right? A cheating situation. But the very idea that that would be enshrined into law is insidious to me. But you know, America loves to make cuckolds out of men.
Yes, they do.
That's just what it is.
Yes, they do.
That's making a man a cuckold, man.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
Women tell no lies in this culture, in this society.
Come on, man. Like,
believe all women. Yeah, believe all women.
That's the man. Like, I can't buy into things that don't make sense. Women know they lie.
Yeah.
I mean, for a woman to look me in the eye and tell me she's never lied, it's a lie.
He said it's a lie.
I mean, think about that, man. So you mean to tell me that there's something about you and who you are as a person, just because you're a person who has a vagina and a uterus, that you're impervious to lying?
Yeah. You know what? I would say, Gigi, it'd be easier to find a woman that hasn't lied about paternity or pregnancy, rather than the ones that have lied about it, because you be counting all day.
There needs to definitely be some legal protections, but
there needs to be penalties. It would be penalties for doing that.
Absolutely. Paternity fraud in general should have penalties, and you just hear at most people getting a slap on the hand. So it's absolutely ridiculous.
There's one thing I like about the heartbeat bill, man. Basically, it's automatic. It's automatic paternity testing. So basically, they will start doing it at the hospital.
But you know what?
Yes, sir.
Man, look, this is how you know society will not punish women for damn near anything. It was recently a situation in which a woman killed her child and put the child in the freezer, man. Now, you guess what time that woman got?
Probation, probably.
Probation. Let a man kill a child and put the child in the freezer and see how much time he gets.
Yeah, will he get out?
I doubt it. Then let him go to jail and see what happens to him in jail.
Yeah.
In a freezer?
In the freezer, bro. Put the baby in the freezer. I hate to say it, man. I mean, and the woman didn't get punished for it, man.
God damn it. All right. Well,
just real talk now. This is not a lie, man. This is not a joke, man.
Oh, I didn't take it as one. I report on these cases all the time, but it hurts my heart. I really got to say, as a father, most particularly, it definitely hurts my heart. But I have a couple of friends who found out about their children years later, and it was, when you talk about the emotional bond, it was such that they had to continue as if that was not true to keep from being on a roof somewhere with a deer rifle. Like that was all they could do. They had to ignore it and keep pushing forward because they had spent so many years raising this child, and they were so emotionally bonded. And this has happened multiple times. So,
share the screen. Share the screen, Doc. There it is right there. Hold on. Let me make sure that, let me make the screen larger because you can't see it all. 2 years, Tennessee mom who left 8-month-old baby in freezer gets 2 years probation. It wasn't moving.
Yeah.
And here's the the sweet white woman who did it.
Normally, it is a white woman.
Yeah. She put her baby in the freezer.
8 months old. It wasn't like it's a newborn. It's an 8-month-old baby.
I mean, the baby, man, is like cruising around at that point.
Yeah, in somebody else's yard. Yeah, there was the other report. I think you reported on a doc where there's a black woman that actually beat her 3-year-old to death with a tire iron because he was standing on the sink in the bathroom.
Yeah, I reported on it in the last show, and it hurt my heart to even report it. But I'm saying these are the kind of cases that keep happening, and we act like they aren't. But all right, so we finally have moved to, I think, the point that people have been waiting for. Right, we're gonna go ahead and jump into Lovecraft County. I wanted to put first up, on the screen, because it may come out. So I want to let my two guests know that I pulled up the IMDb site for Lovecraft. So if there's a particular actor whose name you don't remember, you can ask me to pull it up. I'll put it up on the screen so we can get on the same page, because the names can kind of escape us.
Man, I only know 5 characters in that thing, man. I know Letty Ruby, the white lady, Atticus, and Hippolyta. That's all I know.
And that's why I will pull this up at your discretion, because the names can kind of escape us. But what I also found was an article that was on The Guardian that we might be able to use as a skeleton for walking through the various episodes. Now, as most of the people who are consistent listeners of the Onyx Report know, we did a review of Antebellum over a month ago, maybe 2. And we did talk about a few of the episodes of Lovecraft, but then I decided, I want to wait till the season ends and revisit it, because it's being celebrated in many different circles as this avant-garde, new wave, Black film tradition that celebrates diversity and gender and sexual orientation in new and profound ways. And you got all kinds of different aesthetics. You got hip hop, you got 80s white rock music, you got all this kind of stuff happening. And this is a new era and a new time. And yet, in all of these discussions, I'm not seeing very much, not only to celebrate, but the representation of particularly heterosexual Black men I find highly problematic. So I thought, let me get a couple of my favorite thinkers in, and if I can subject them to the pain of watching this, we could actually have some dialogue. So I figured we might walk through, using this as a kind of a blueprint, walk through episode by episode. Just kind of generalizing and reflecting on some of our thoughts.
Yeah. I said, here's a warning: don't try this at home.
Do not. I mean, I guess if you like Antebellum, you may like this, but no. So, but so starting out season 1. So it looks like
episode 1.
Yeah. So let me see what is this? Did they start from the bottom up? Yeah, they did. My bad. Okay, season 1, episode 1. So here we go. Any thoughts, reflections you'd like to share on this?
I think we talked about this. I don't know where we talked about this on air. Right after Atticus, which is the lead actor,
played right here,
but played by Jonathan Majors. Basically, when he first got into town, he was actually looking for his father. And one of the first scenes of the his first episode is he walks into a bar looking for his father, and he wanted to talk to the bar owner. And he walks out back. They pointed out back, and out back there was a man doing fellatio on the bar owner. So you had a gay Black male scene within the first, 5 minutes of the season.
Right.
So it kind of portends to what's going to go on in the rest of the season. So you have I wouldn't say anti-Black male, but the thing is, you have Black males on the down low within 5 minutes.
Right.
And go ahead. Look here, man. Look, I'm going to the very opening of the movie. Of the show itself, which I did note. I'm like, to me, Lovecraft Country could have been good. If they let the story do the talking instead of the characters with the dialogue doing the talking and like there's no. It would be different if there were a reason to see this person performing fellatio on a man at the bar, but there's no reason for it.
No. And they're in the alley. They're in the back alley.
What is the point of that? It had no rhyme or reason at that moment to be shown.
Yeah.
But let me talk about this. So the first thing you see in the first episode is Atticus going to war with aliens. Okay. And so, well, first of all, he's like in like a World War or Korean War setting. The Korean War, right? And so you think everything is normal, and then all of a sudden it evolves into a war with aliens. And then here comes Jackie Robinson with a baseball bat, and he beats one of the aliens. But there's a foreshadowing there of the Asian woman, which I don't want to let the cat out of the bag right now because that doesn't happen until episode 5. But immediately after that, so what I get from that is men are violent, men engage in war, men are martial, they engage in senseless violence. Of course, war is a patriarchal enterprise. So that's the conclusion I drew from seeing that to begin with. Okay. But then when Atticus gets off the bus, he has a conversation with a black woman. And the black woman is asking him, what is he reading? And so Atticus goes into this account of how what he's reading is about some dude named John Carter.
On Mars.
Yeah. So there's something the colonization of Mars, whatever the case may be. But he talks about how he's a hero. He was in the Confederate Army, and then the black woman reprimands him like ain't no hero coming from the Confederacy. And then Atticus was like, well, it's just all about being a hero, and it's a fantasy, and there you can tell there's a foreshadowing of how black men think and how they think like white men.
Right. Well, and the other piece to that too, first in the dream sequence, when we see Jackie Robinson, it's also a nod to the last couple episodes where you find out who the baseball figure actually is. So that comes out a little bit later. But when you talk about the scene on the bus, very much like the other scenes that happen a little bit later in the episode where they're driving around the South, what was alluring about Lovecraft is this nod to African-American history. Right. And you kind of had this idea, at least halfway, 3/4 through the first episode, that this might be a well-balanced introduction. Like one of the things that I first thought when I saw this was, wow, it reminded us of a time period pre-feminism, pre-black feminism, where you kind of saw this togetherness between black men and women. And it was nostalgic in a particular way. But you started to see the underpinnings of it when Letty, who you can see here on the right, you started to see her more and more kind of being pushed to the center, even though, Tick is supposed to be the main character, but she ends up kind of saving people a couple of different things. So you kind of see it kind of inching out. But the way they presented, at least the first episode, was that we were together. There's an African-American historical experience where we're both oppressed under white racism. And and so that was the allure of it, I think, for a number of us in that first episode. Like, okay, this may actually be something that is promoting black men and women together in some form or fashion.
Yeah, I could tell off the bat though it wasn't because but in the first episode, but I could tell off the bat there was too many hints and nods. And like I think the first episode was the episode in which they were all getting ready to go on a trip in order to do intelligence work for some magazine that
the book
about safe travel for black folks, right? And one of the things that he did was he told his wife that she couldn't go. Now it couldn't be the fact that she couldn't go because going there would be dangerous for him, for the woman, and she might be subjected to being lynched.
Which in the first episode they were, they were accosted by white people. So
so lynching was a reality, and then being abused by police officers at that. Right. So here's the dichotomy. You have this accusation today that black men don't protect. But in that moment that Gigi brought up, that was a clear act by Courtney Vance's character of protection. And yet, again, that was some foreshadowing that his protection was seen as oppressive.
Yes.
But if it doesn't happen, black women are never protected by black men. So you have this double standard. Well, not a double standard. It's a rock and a hard place, right? It's this unwinnable situation where if you protect, you're oppressing. If you don't protect, you're negligent and cowardly.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Or you could just be Letty and just save the day in every situation.
Yeah. Letty be known she doesn't need protecting.
Right. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So,
in fact, you know, there's a foreshadowing of the colorism angle too between Letty, who is, you know, as you can see, extremely light skinned and fine haired, you know, for lack of a better term, and small and thin, where her sister is a very large black woman.
Right.
Ruby, I think is
Ruby. Ruby's a very large black woman.
Mm-hmm.
And
you can tell there's some tension between them very early on.
In fact, how about their mother, how their mother felt about either one of them. So there's a very early on, you can see that the colorism tension.
Absolutely.
It will be very, very apparent later on in the season.
Boy, will it? Yeah, so let's move on, man, at y'all pace, bro.
So we're at episode 2, right, where we actually find that they've made it to the city or whatnot. That matter of fact, keep in mind too, I want to get the characters' names right. Even though I'm really not happy with how briefly Courtney B. Vance was in the series. But hold on. What was his name? There we go. George Freeman. Right, George. Yeah. So, you know, we find out that George's daughter has some kind of ability where she not only as an artist and a comic book artist at that, she also has some kind of clairvoyant ability where she can kind of sense on a map which places to go to and what kinds of threats may be, you know, pretty much wherever she draws. And they end up making it to, what is it, to Lovecraft? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
To the county itself?
Yeah, after they've been, you know, they've been chased by the local sheriff and, you know, well, we're not gonna give away too many spoilers, but almost executed by local sheriff. But they were saved, you know, and actually made it to what we call Lovecraft country, to the mansion.
Right. So they make it to the mansion. They find this cult of very wealthy, powerful whites who are into, you know, the occult. And they have access to mystical powers and whatnot, and spell casting, and so they, you know, and then they also find that there's some family ties that are mixed into this in terms of Tick's mother, but they end up kind of trapped in here, and there's an allusion to you know the source of where vampires and werewolves come from. They actually come from the writings that reflect on creatures that can be found in this area. Right, so they're going there to save Tick's father, who's played by Michael K. Williams, and they're trying to find out where he went and what happened to him, and then they end up getting caught up in this mansion with this wealthy white family. Right?
Yeah. And so before we go there, though, we have to talk about the last scene in the first episode where they were attacked by the monsters. And of course, the person who saves the day is Letty.
Letty, of course.
And because she, I don't know why a man would allow the woman to go out there and run and be subjected to that kind of danger to begin with.
Get to the car, right?
But I think it has something to do with the white police not wanting the black men to lead.
That's true. Plus, she said she was faster. That's what she said.
Oh, she was faster. Okay,
she was faster. That was the agreement. That I'm faster because I ran track in high school, and I said a record. So she was faster, so she could actually run faster than he did to actually get to the car.
And then I remember I remember Tick grabbing her. You gonna save us? I know you can. You gonna do it, baby. And I guess that's like the kind of gesturing that you know. Man, I didn't mean to be funny when I was saying that.
It is funny though.
But I mean, that's the kind of gesturing that Tick made to Letty in order to encourage her, you know, to save them, because she was charged with the responsibility of saving them by going to get the car so they could flash the lights on the monster.
This pat on the head kind of the kind of encouragement is throughout the whole show. It seems like every other scene, it seemed like.
But then, but what makes it interesting is it goes. So when they finally encounter the people with the cult, right? One of the things that you notice is that there's this. It was an acknowledgement that like only men can join this dinner because they basically are all hoodwinked into thinking that they never encountered the violence that we just talked about. The scene where she had to run and save him from the monster. They forget about it all.
Everybody except for Tick. Yeah.
So Tick is the only one that remembers, but they got to go to a dinner, and only men can go to the dinner. All women are excluded. So it's a men only thing. So so Letty's left out, and the white woman. Well, I don't know if the white woman even presents herself at that point, but I think she does.
Yeah,
because
she does.
She does.
She does, and she has some resentment for her own fathers and uncles or whatever, for not being allowed into the group because she's a woman.
Yeah, the old boys club. Yeah,
the old boys club. So she tries to bond to some extent with them on the basis of Kalila says Christina. Is that her name? She tries to bond with them on the basis of being oppressed, of having had experience with being oppressed. Yeah, Christina Braithwaite. Right. Yeah. But the interesting thing about this too is this is the episode where we run into Tick's irrationality.
Yes.
His extreme kind of emotionalism, his violent temperament, but it's explained as him being a war vet. So at least that's the context for it. But it comes out throughout the series where he's irrational and he kind of can't be completely depended upon to follow through because he's irrational and because he's damaged.
Yeah.
Man, bruh. Tick was attacked by a damn Asian woman with a fucking knife and a gun, man. I'm just saying. Well, at that point, that's all he was attacked with. But the point to me is, hold on, wait a minute. Is he not supposed to be emotional related to that?
Well, what it's saying is, in other words, irrational, not emotional, but irrational. And it's always Letty that has to pull him off. Like, okay, you have to calm down and stop being emotional and actually think rationally about the circumstance because you're in danger. And by you being irrational, you're making yourself more in danger. So a lot of times, Letty has to actually pull him back.
Yeah, his mommy. Letty's his mommy.
It was she's the male authority in this group right there.
Yeah, crying today. But here's one of the other things that takes place in the episode that I had severe problems with. Because what they do in this is they reinvoke old stereotypes often. Now, the whole stereotype of a violent, irrational man in regard to black men is a stereotype unto itself. I mean, the idea that black men are incapable of being rational or highly emotionally, extreme and violent. Those are pretty stereotypes. But one of the things that happens in this episode, when they're locked into this mansion, each one, George, Letty, and Tick, are locked in different rooms, and they each have a different experience. And I think it was initiated by this white cult where they're having these they're not hallucinations necessarily, but they're these strange experiences. And Letty's experience is that Tick comes to her room. Right now, it's not really him, but she thinks it is. She lets him in. They start talking, and at a particular point, things start to get heated sexually. Right. And there's this painting in the room, I believe, of it's Adam and Eve and the snake.
Right.
At a certain point, when Tick begins to unzip his pants, instead of a penis, the snake comes out. And from there, there's this kind of rape narrative playing out. That I found highly problematic because this is an old trope when it comes to black men, and to see it invoked in this episode from a black male character to the black female character with these whites watching in the background, I just find that highly problematic.
Yeah, I think throughout the whole series, the sex that black men had was bordered on violent. Yeah.
It was violent, man. Every sexual encounter they had was violent.
Yeah.
Either the woman was violent or every sexual encounter in this damn thing.
Yeah, it was violent. I think the only limitations was when the white man William was actually making love, but that's later on in the season. We'll get into that.
Yeah, man. But I mean, look, let me just say this. So I still was trying to put together the meaning of the the 5 aphorisms of this cult. So it's like God created Adam, Eve fucked, monsters. No, Adam named creation or something like so. It's, Adam named creation, Eve fucked, monsters came everywhere, and then there's some other stuff. It's absolutely. I don't get it though, man. Like I tried to wrap my head around it and make sense of it, but I never actually understood it.
Well, it's at this point that this group, led by Christine's father, he's apparently trying to cast this spell using Tick, since Tick has a bloodline relationship with their family. They're trying to cast a spell for him to become immortal by reopening Eden, the Garden of Eden. Right. But this is also the episode where you have George, played by Courtney Vance. This is the episode he dies. So the second episode of the season, right? The elder, intelligent, progressive black male dies off very early on. Right. So this is the episode where we see that happen, and by the end of it, they're trying to cast this spell and use Tick's body to do it. Right, and this is also where we find out about Tick's father not only being gay, but having an abusive upbringing with his father, who has not been able to reconcile his own sexual, orientation. Any thoughts about any of that?
No. It's gonna be real apparent about his father's relationship with Tick and his sexual orientation, because it really gets heated like later on in the series. So,
to Sister Warrior in the comment section, trust me, it gets a lot worse.
It gets a lot worse.
It gets a lot worse. But
we're just scratching the surface.
We scratching the surface. So we get to episode 3. So this is about the point where Letty gets hold of some resources and buys a home.
Yes.
Anybody want to comment on that?
Yeah. This is right. This is right after the destruction of the castle and basically the killing of the patriarchs that were in a circle at the manor, right. And this is right after, and episode 3 opens up with the funeral of George, which is played by Courtney B. Vance.
Right.
And mysteriously, Letty gets an inheritance from her dead mother, who she formerly thought was broke, and she buys this big old haunted mansion. It's connected.
Well, I think she misrepresented where the funds actually came from. I think.
No. She thought it was told to her, the way it came to her, that she got inheritance from her mother. We're gonna find out later that it wasn't true. Basically, the thing is, it was told to her that way, but she found out where it came from later on.
But let's not miss out on the fact, because I got to go back to the last episode only to move forward to this one. Let's not forget the fact that Letty died last episode and was risen back from the dead. Poor Uncle George, he stayed dead.
He stayed dead, yeah.
Right. Now Letty was brought back from the dead.
Yeah, by the white woman. By the patriarch, yeah.
And also, it's very odd because I'm wondering, because there are allusions to Letty having been with multiple men before. Because Letty, of course, I mean, just the way that she carries herself, I mean, she carries herself in a way that it would seem to me she owns her sexuality.
Yeah,
right. That's the way.
That's the way it appeared. But the thing is, remember in the first episode when Tick was out by the tree, and Letty, who's a photographer, is actually glaring at him and actually taking pictures of him,
right?
With that lustful eye. So in other words, that was the female gaze on black male sexuality. In other words, he was a concubine.
Yeah.
And we find, but this is the interesting part. So not only in this house that she purchases, it's in a white neighborhood, right? So let's not forget that it's a hostile environment. The neighbors don't want her there. They're throwing, bricks in the window and threatening them and whatnot. So that's all kind of going on. And then you find out that the house is haunted with because it was owned by one of the family members of the white elite occultists,
right?
Who was torturing black people.
and
in the
experimenting on
house.
And
experimenting on them. So the ghosts of those tortured black folk were there, still in the house, along with the ghosts of this white patriarch. Right. So all of that is kind of happening. In the midst of that, they throw a party. I think this is the very episode where they throw a party and she and Tick have sex for the first time.
Yeah.
And we find out later that she was actually a virgin. Right.
Which is another interesting thing that we'll find out later about Tick. You know.
Okay.
Yeah. So she was all crying. I was like, what is this about? Like I was thinking, because she owned a sexuality, I thought, that maybe she was on a period. That's the reason why. But then later it comes out that that wasn't the case. She actually had lost her virginity at that moment.
Which is interesting because she was portrayed in the first 2 episodes as loose.
Right.
Correct.
But go ahead.
That goes back to the so-called misogyny, because there are various men who said that they hit that.
Yeah.
But it also speaks to Tick's misogyny, because when he has sex with her, he treats her as if she owns her sexuality as well.
Right.
And by the time he finds out that she was a virgin, now he's apologizing. And there's this subtext of, yet again, an actual rape to the imagined rape in episode 2. So, so 2 episodes in a row, you have Tick being represented as a rapist, but not of white women, of black women.
Well, but basically, or borderline. That's borderline, because it was actually very violent sex, but it was borderline. And then because after he finished, he said, when she approached him, she said, it was my first time. He said, first time what?
So all men are whores.
Because he thought that she was experienced.
Right. Well, she carries herself like she is.
She is, and where she responded to him in that scene, I thought she was.
Right. But one of the interesting things I find about this series is how ahistorical it can be. Right. We're talking about the 50s, right? And somehow it's treated as if it's 2020. So you have these kind of subliminal conversations about consent in a 2020 kind of framework, but operating by the standards of the 50s. Letty has communicated. She's with it. They go ahead and have a sexual liaison, but again, he's framed as an aggressor who's kind of abused her space and victimized her in a certain way. And they do kind of suggest that she has agency, like she doesn't seem to regret it. But up through the scene, the way they play it is very problematic. Right.
Yeah, this is the borderline Me Too.
Hey, look, man, I listened to what these people who created this show had to say about this shit, because they got a podcast, right? And I said it to Dr. Johnson. He ain't listened to it, apparently, right? But this is they thought it was hot.
Yeah, they did.
Like, I mean, no, I'm saying, like, the way the woman writer to this show, she was like, it was so hot and it was so steamy and passionate, and the thing, Tick was so great because he didn't trip off the blood. And I'm listening to this shit like, huh? Like people experience reality differently. So to them, it was a steamy, hot, sexy scene. Yeah. So there's a gay guy, and there's also the woman writer for the show, right? And they're talking about what's transpiring. Now, to them, Letty is portraying a vampire. That's what she's doing at this point in this movie. She's being vampiric. Because she's already been killed, and so she's just now learning how to feel, right? Which to me, it didn't make any damn sense whatsoever. But I mean, this is the way that they picture her. They picture her as a vampire, right? But y'all go ahead. I don't want to.
Is a succubus, yeah.
It's a succubus, right?
But yeah, go ahead.
Well, we have episode 4, right? As you can see here, misogyny, murder, and Montrose, right? So, any thoughts about this one?
I think, isn't this the episode where Ruby and Christina actually get together, or Ruby and William?
Put some reminders here, but
I think it's Ruby and William, and William gives her that offer.
Right. So I think this is the episode where I guess it's not letting. Let me see if it'll let me in. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. All right. Okay.
I do believe that.
Yeah, it's called A History of Violence, I think is the name of the episode, right?
Mhm.
And
so this is the episode I think where they go into, was it under the museum to find the
that's what they do. That's what they do. Hey yo, that's Oh man, this is crazy, man. This part right here. Oh man, look. Do you want to go to the end and work our way back? Or do you want to start from the start?
I mean, this is a very, because there's so many different scenes in this particular episodes. It's kind of difficult to get to it all in one shot.
Well, but this is also, I mean, apparently here this is the episode where William and Ruby first hook up.
Yes, it was.
So this is the episode before the shit really hits the fan on this whole question of Ruby. But there's still this attraction between black men and white women and white men. Excuse me.
Yeah,
I'll get to that in a minute. But the black women and white men that's being played up here in a very interesting way, especially in the era of, or the resurgence of the era of BLM. Yeah. You have this kind of this attraction that's unresolved in regard to black women and white men kind of being played into this episode too.
And you know what? That goes back. This actually goes back to people that have seen it, right? It goes back to my thing about the myth of white womanhood, right? They look to white men to give them what? Whiteness, right? And guess in this episode, what does she said? I'm gonna give you your. William says, "I'm gonna give you your heart's desire," and I do believe in this episode she wakes up as a white woman.
Well, I think I was thinking that might have been the next one, but
no, that's this one.
That's that one. Yeah, that's this one.
Well, if that's the one, then it's highly problematic, especially because when she first wakes up as a white woman, of course she freaks out.
She freaks out,
and she goes back to the black community, and she walks near a barber shop, and of course, black folk are looking at her like, "What the hell is this white woman doing?"
Yeah, and she bumps into a black boy.
Right.
And immediately, now I don't, this is a TV show, because immediately, like within seconds, of white police officers come in and actually start wanting to beat on the teenage boy,
right,
for just bumping into her.
Well, that's the thing is they bump into each other. I think the boy one who fell down?
Yeah, the boy fell down.
I think the boy fell down. The cops show up. Yeah. And she's so tongue-tied the whole time the cops are yelling at him and about to beat him. She's just standing there.
Right.
And eventually she gets her bearings and absolves the little boy. But it took a lot longer than I thought it should have.
You know what the funny thing is? What's really funny is that when she first got her white skin and she walks out in this robe, right? People looking at her and and she bumps into the boy and the cops show up immediately. All the black people raise their hands, and so does she.
Yeah, because she knows she black still. She knows she black.
She's still black. Yeah, she doesn't realize the power of having white skin.
But Dr. Nicole Ali said that, but she had a ghost before they had sex though, so that's hot, right? but even if it, because I didn't get a chance to listen to the podcast, and I don't know how much I'm regretting that, but I appreciate my brother Gigi taking that sacrifice for all of us. But even if that is, something they actually found stimulating, it says a lot about even their perceptions of black men. In terms of being CompuSerfs. I mean, we're there for reproduction, we're there for sexual recreation, and we're there for arbitrary protection in the eyes of many who've been socialized into this reality from Generation X onward, especially.
You know what? Because when she woke up, right, as a white woman, there was a vial, right? There was money, and there was a vial of the serum, right? And she left the money and took the vial and said, "Why come you didn't take the money?" She said, "Because I
don't need no money.
I didn't need no money. I got all the currency I need."
Right.
White woman. Yep.
Was this the same episode where she goes back to the store that denied her a job?
No.
Well,
I think this is afterward. But the thing is, I think that's the next episode. But the first, I think the end of that episode, she actually goes back out into the world as a white woman, all dressed up, and she goes to the little like ice cream shops and stuff like that, and let the white men cater to her.
Yeah, and this isn't really her as a white woman. This is a very particular white woman that we see in Lovecraft at an earlier point, like in the second episode. Right. This is actually a particular person she turns into. So it's not she doesn't look like Ruby, who turns white. She becomes a white woman that actually, existed in the series.
In the series, yes.
Oh, ugly white woman too, man. She wasn't,
Yeah, she wasn't pretty, but the thing is that, and I think that was the point, the mere fact that she was white.
That she was white.
Yeah. I mean, you're gonna be white, man. You may as well at least be like the AT&T girl white or something, like,
Well, this is the episode where all hell breaks loose. When you get to episode 5, they call it the goriest, sauciest episode yet. This is the episode with the infamous stiletto scene.
Oh, so
this is the episode where she goes back to I guess it's a mall, or what is it?
Doc, you missing something.
Store?
Doc, you missing something, man. So you forgot they go to the underwater cavern in episode 4, right? But what you're missing is very important.
Oh yeah,
it's very important because they go in there. So they solve all the tests.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly, Tick is the one subjected to all of the torture because he's got to put his hand inside of a machine and his blood gets drained because everything is in his blood. Okay, which is a hint to the patriarchy, I guess. So anyway, they finally get where they're going because they're looking for the book of names.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
And who has the book of names other than a two-spirit, a hermaphrodite?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? A male and a female.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so
Native American, right?
Yeah, Native American. Yeah.
So anyway, she's got the book of names. Well, she has not the book of names, but she has 2 scrolls from the book of names, or whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. So they end up taking her with them, and she really can't deal with being in the real world. She's been locked in this room for so long, and she's from a whole different place in time anyway. I guess she's from the enchanted 2-spirit forest, or whatever the case may be.
But you are not shit for that, Dr. Gigi.
But look though, they take it to the house, right? And then guess what Montross does?
Right.
For no reason, just inadvertently slits her throat.
Yes.
I get, and that what exactly this is.
Oh, he purposely slit her throat.
He slit her throat, and he said, "I'm sorry," but you know what this is about. Well, from what the women doing the podcast said, they wanted to demonstrate that people who are oppressed can also be oppressors. Mm-hmm. So that's why he killed her or him. Mm-hmm. But then he killed him because he's a latent homosexual and doesn't want anybody to know.
Yeah, they want that image. But the thing is, the reason he said he killed him is because she's the only one that actually translate the scrolls.
Right.
And so he got rid of the scrolls and her, so they couldn't be translated. So they couldn't actually go further in their investigation or on this adventure.
Right. Yeah. But we know the real reason why.
Well, when you see things like this, because they did this in Watchmen, it's more about the images than it is about the story.
But come on, man, like as far as it's a double entendre. You got a black man killing a trans woman.
The black gay man killing a trans woman,
right? Because he's afraid of his own homosexuality.
Yes,
but it's also in terms of the story, it's Montrose protecting his son Tick. Khalil is right. Like he's trying to protect Tick, but the way he acts throughout the entire series is so irrational and ridiculous.
Yeah,
but killing the 2-spirit was just made no sense whatsoever. So it actually brought them back to Letty's house where the patriarch who's killing people and experimenting on them.
Yeah,
his ghost is still there, so they're dealing with that as well, right?
They exercise the ghost. The thing is that after they because the museum is like, I do believe is in Boston, and they go down and they go down into the catacombs and actually find the scrolls and find the 2-spirit, and they come back, right? They had to come back. The way they come back is through the elevator that actually, when they go back up, it comes back up into the house in Chicago. So you have almost like a portal.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. The elevator's a portal. But another thing that you missed about the seance, not the seance, but what it is a seance in the basement,
right?
Was that there was a prayer to who? Bet you don't know. This is trivia for 5.
Well, that's why we have PhDs in the house.
Well, they called and conjured up Mama Oya.
Oh yeah,
Mama Oya to help them. And it's funny because you would think that like if somebody's performing voodoo, and they want to get to spirits, they would call on Papa Legba to perform that function because that's the mediator between the living and the dead. But it's
female medium. Yeah.
It is what it is. We proceed, brothers.
Well, you're dealing with goddess mentality. Only female, figures can be invoked, right?
Yeah.
And this is actually something I've heard discussed among practitioners. This kind of, we talked about this back when we did the archetypes, BGS. When we were talking about the goddess archetype, but this identification with only female deities. Yes. As if the male deities have no presence. So I think what Gigi is talking about is incredibly profound in that regard, because we're seeing it play out again.
But you notice it throughout this whole thing, right? When it comes to spell casting and this kind of stuff, it's black women and white males for the most part. All the wizards are white, right? And all the witches are black for the most part.
And you see Tick stumbling through, trying to figure it out.
Well, he's the everyman. He's like he would be like Neo in the Matrix in this particular he's actually centered on a lot about of Matrix-like elements.
Well, and now transitioning to episode 5.
Yes,
it's the department store where Ruby, as a white woman, is now able to easily get a job.
Yes.
And all of the attributes, all of the accomplishments that she's made up to that point now work for her rather than against her. So she's actually more qualified than everybody else now, even though she has the same, resume she had before. But now as a white woman, she's advanced. So she's hired, promoted to a very high level within the department store. And she's really experimenting with what it's like to be white. Be a white woman at that. Any thoughts?
There's several. Is because in this episode it reveals that William, is using this is Christina using the same spell to be a man. And one thing that she said about magic, especially for women, is magic gives you the ability to do whatever the fuck you want to do, right? So they're using magic to actually get their heart's desires. She wants power, like the white woman wants power as a man, and the black woman wants power as a white woman, which is telling.
Now, man, but shit, they done told the truth.
I mean, they admitted the truth,
I mean, right there. So the white woman wants to be a white man.
Yeah.
The black woman wants to be a white woman. Well, I hate. Well, hey, well. And Atticus don't know what the hell he want to do.
Well, he's a stepping stone because he's a stepping stone to get power. That's what he is.
He thinks he's got the power, but all along, everyone around him is using him in order to get what they want.
Yeah.
He's a concubine.
Yeah.
And he's constantly trying to protect others who are actually using him to advance themselves.
Yeah. Yep.
From Christine to Letty.
And this is where Doctor was actually talking about the ending, one of the ending scenes where the white man does get the stiletto in the behind, right? Is because what's his Ruby, who's actually disguised as a white woman, goes out with her white counterparts from Marshall Fields from the store to the Chicago South Side, and out in the alley she sees her manager actually try to molest one of the only black girl that works in the store,
right? And
then the black girl doesn't consent to his advances, and she runs back into the bar and he calls her a nigger bitch, right? So Ruby, to get even with him, she shows up and basically she engages in like a BDSM episode with the white man, right? And then she turns him over, and then she rapes him with her stiletto. Okay.
Right.
And then as the white skin is peeling off, or the spell is wearing off, and then white skin is peeling off of her, she turns him over. I said, I just want you to know that it was a nigger bitch that did this to you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess that's what you would do if you had magic.
Yeah, if you had magic, yeah, you can do whatever you want to do. But that's her. You know, you can see that the violence toward men that rape or taking out a former rape on men is prevalent throughout this whole season.
Right.
I can imagine women clapping their hands, intersexual feminists
Oh yeah.
everywhere.
Oh yeah. Oh,
You know, like praising Mama Oya and you know, whatever goddesses may be, Sophia and Mary Magdalene and everybody else. Like, get him, girl.
Yeah, you know
get him.
You know, it's just like a touchdown in the Super Bowl. You know, they all jumped up, waving their hands, and say, "Yes, girl."
Yeah, this is a liberating moment, supposedly. Now, anybody wants to drop on episode 5?
No, basically, we'll be all day if we try to get all the points in this thing. So.
Exactly. But episode 6 is where we find out about Tick in Korea, right? And what actually happened to him in Korea while he's there. And of course, he runs across Judy, or I guess they call her Judy loving 9-tailed fox spirit.
Yeah, but her name is G, I do believe.
Gia, absolutely.
Yeah, Gia.
Played by Jamie Chung, right? So Gia apparently is a spirit. Yes. Right. So we see her, she's in love with American culture. She loves watching movies, this whole kind of thing. And they're showing you Korea before the war. And they're showing the dynamics between men and women and how women have to, kind of meet this ideal in order to be considered attractive for viable men, or what Kevin would call high value men in Korea at that point in time. And she's not really able to figure out those social graces and nuances. She's not able to really get it, but we don't know why. And then all of a sudden you see her having sex with a Korean man, and all of these foxtails come out of every orifice in her body. And the very first thing, I don't know if you guys noticed, but the very first thing it does when she's having sex with this Korean man, all these tails come out of her eyes, her mouth, her ears, her vagina. And the very first thing that happens is he's anally penetrated by them and then ripped apart and liquefied, basically, where there's blood all over the room.
Yeah, and basically, and the spirit is actually drained in her. Yeah.
And so the whole idea with this, or does anybody want to explain what the 9-tailed spirit is about?
Okay. Basically this is one is to get revenge, but it's there to actually suck the soul out of the person's body, out of the man's body. And to tell the backstory is that basically her mother is a single mother, right? And in Korea, that's very shameful. So to actually get her honor back, she has to marry somebody. So she marries this man, but the man married her because she was a single mother. She's vulnerable, and her husband actually rapes her daughter that she had a previous relationship. And so to actually get revenge, the mother actually goes to a miscommon, and they actually get revenge. On the father, they put this spirit into her little girl, and the little girl has to take 100 souls before she's released. So this is the mother's revenge on her husband.
Now the mother didn't know about the 100 souls. So what's essentially happening is she's watching her daughter physically grow older, but it's not really her daughter.
Right.
It's a spirit who's what you call it? Possessed her daughter.
Yes.
And has to kill 100 men. So she's very supportive of it. But what she doesn't expect is the spirit begins to question its own existence, begins to fall in love with Tick. And I'm jumping over a couple things we can revisit, but at the end of the day, she's not interested in killing her 100th man. She wants to exist to the chagrin of the mother, who just wants her daughter back.
Right.
So, you have that whole dynamic. Meanwhile, Tick, we get to see in full war mode. He is, following orders. He's killing. He's killing people, including Korean nurses. That might be what you call it,
including her best friend that he murdered.
Gia's best friend, absolutely, on the suggestion that they may be traitors. So he's a soldier, but he sees Gia later once he's injured in the hospital. Gia's actually about to kill him in revenge of her friend, and Tick begins to develop feelings for her. And eventually she reciprocates those feelings They actually do have sex at one point successfully, but I think the second time they try to have it, she can't stop the tails from coming out,
right?
And she almost kills him. But she does get a glimpse of his future, which she can see whenever she's about to kill somebody.
Yeah.
So
and and basically, she said it because she's a possessed spirit. He's the first person actually saw her as human.
Right. Which she's enthralled by.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say this is the first episode that got me on you really starting to see where they were going with this series, in the sense that it was this kind of global feminism that I started to notice, right? Whether it was Korean women, white women, black women, they were all oppressed by their men, right? And they all needed to kind of come together in this kind of universal feminism that I think will kind of rear its head later on. But this is the kind of, so when they go to Korea to examine this story, one of the things we see is really how oppressed Korean women are, because they have to socialize themselves to serve men in a particular way to be attractive to the kind of men that can support them.
Yeah, and
so this is perceived as inherently oppressive.
And without men, they have no honor or any status in Korean society.
In Korean society, right? So there's no conversation whatsoever about whether men even want to conform to that, even want to go through, because the men they're talking about are just not average men. These are men who are engineers, who are highly educated, and in order to go through that process, that takes time, it takes effort, it takes sacrifice. There's no reflection whatsoever on whether or not those men even want to necessarily do that. The idea is simply that the men get to live and enjoy patriarchy, and the women are suffering because they have to play a role. So it's a very one-dimensional approach to gender dynamics in Korea.
Yeah, man. All I can say is, and I haven't said much about this episode, she got that killer. Gia. I'm done, man.
You had to put that in. That's the G.
No, but I mean, look, man. She loves Guy, man. She loves Tick, man.
Yeah, she did.
She saw what was to come,
and she even told him not to go home.
Yeah, she told him not to go home because she loved him. I think, but I thought that was the last consummation that she needed in order to be broken from the curse. Was with Tick. But she didn't go through with it. So she sacrificed herself and her release from the curse for his sake.
Well, and that's something Kalila brings up in the comment section. She said Tick was a virgin with Gia.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
He was a virgin.
Well, damn.
So your first experience is marred by a 9-tailed demon. Tick would be a little messed up after that.
Yeah. Man, I don't even know how he got with Letty then. I'd be scarred for the rest of my days.
But to go from that to somehow being the aggressor that may have crossed the line with Letty, it's an interesting kind of narrative, right? Yeah. So to go from a demon to that, all right?
But that's funny. Go ahead. But that's funny because in episode 2, that's why he kills the woman who was attacking him in the room where he was having the visions. That was Gia who attacked him. So, and also in the beginning of the series, where the scene was the alien woman, that was also Gia.
That was Gia, yeah. So it's designed for you to watch the whole series again to really understand it, because they do so much time displaced kind of narrative. But we get to episode 7, right? And this is the episode where we get to see Hippolyta come into her own. And any comments on this?
This is a very, very strange episode, but it's also probably the most feminist episode probably in the whole series, in the whole season. Is about female empowerment to the max. Like naming yourself, naming who you are, naming what you want to do, taking your power, and and that kind of stuff. In all different kinds of episodes, like she actually goes back and finds out why George was killed, and she brings back the with the I forget what they call it. I think the orbs. The Ori. And she figures it out and figures out that it's a that it's a time displacement, basically
time machine.
A time portal.
Okay. Well, they don't show. I thought they might show it, but let's before we jump into her. This is the scene. Apparently, this is the episode where we find out that William is actually Christina.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so the white woman is taking a similar potion and becoming the white man that's been sleeping with Ruby, Letty's sister, the black woman. Right. So there's this interesting kind of subtext about black women and white women in terms of the sexual attraction beyond white men. So this kind of, again, this universal feminism kind of playing out in a way where both groups disassociate from men altogether, symbolically speaking, and they really kind of only need each other. So it's a strange relationship in and of itself. But you're right, and what we see happening with Hippolyta, she ends up going a few different places. You know, anybody want to comment on where she goes?
Well, the first place she goes, she wants to be she wants to be basically a rocket. What was the woman's name? She wanted to actually go visit first in France.
Josephine Baker.
Josephine
Baker, right?
Yeah,
right.
One of the black feminist heroes is Josephine Baker, right? To be the liberated woman, and so she goes visit her first,
and becomes her lover.
And becomes her lover, and then she comes back, and then the second time, which you had a problem with, Dr. Johnson, where Hippolyta becomes, she goes back to Africa, right? Or supposed to be not a Spartan. What do they call those? An Amazon, a black Amazon.
Yeah.
And so she's in training to be worthy of a black Amazon.
And so in this particular scene, she's being trained to be a warrior, and what is it? There's about 30 to 50 of them, and then all of a sudden they're attacked by a whole regiment of Confederate white male Confederate soldiers.
Swords, yeah.
Who got? I don't remember if they had guns, but of course the women had swords.
Yeah. And
eventually, they just decimate all of them by themselves. Just all of them.
Well, most of them, half of them by themselves. Yeah. Because the other half, there was more on the other side, and when the rest of them started charging, she didn't want to be Hippolyta anymore.
Right. But
she wanted to be George's wife all of a sudden.
She wanted to be George's wife. But the
thing is, didn't the alien, because the first place she went was to the alien, it was to the alien world where she's picked up by aliens, actually experimented on and actually altered by the aliens. And basically the aliens were actually black women.
Oh yeah, not a black man in sight.
Not a black man in sight.
Black goddesses.
A black goddess.
The mother creations of the universe they beamed on her like Scotty and told her, "You can name yourself. What is your name?"
It kind of reminded me of George Clinton and the Mothership, with just the female form.
Afrofuturist.
Yes. There's some references, I think, to not only P-Funk, but references to maybe even Sun Ra. But here you can see in this image, you have Hippolyta here, and here you have the goddess, right?
Yeah.
The black goddess archetype, and they have direct interaction, and of course it's a black woman.
Yeah.
And so this is right. You were actually right what you said earlier. This is considered the most black feminist episode because we get to see Hippolyta embrace her most powerful self, right? But this is the part that really pissed me off to no end. This is also, I think, the episode where she confronts George. So in all her time traveling and all the things she does, which we find out later, she spends I think it's hundreds of years doing, or whatever.
200 years, yeah.
200 years. She eventually comes to a place where she sees George. She wakes up with him one morning while he's still alive. So she kind of goes back in time. And in this moment where you would think she would want to talk to the husband that dies mysteriously, that she doesn't get to find out how. Instead of having, this kind of loving connection with him, what does she do?
She berates him. She chastises him.
She berates him. She chastises him. She talks about the ways in which he oppressed her. right? By not letting her, be her full self, right?
Yeah, and I think it was one of the episodes where she said she named, I think it was a comet, and she didn't get credit for it because she was a little black girl.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So in other words, she dreamed of being so expansive, right? But she says the world made her small, and that George, being married to George, enabled her to be even smaller.
Right. So this was reminiscent to me of Color Purple, where somehow you got this legacy of slavery and white supremacy, but Mister becomes the primary antagonist. And in this context, out of everything she's dealt with in her entire life, George is the focal point of her rage and frustration. He's the most progressive, supportive male, heterosexual male in the series, mind you, who's been dead since the first episode. And so the first time we get to see him again, she's berating him and blaming him for being made small, as you say.
Not letting her be her true powerful self.
Right. So again, much like we saw with Ice Cube last week, becoming symbolic of all black men, George becomes symbolic of all black men and their aspirations to patriarchy, even though his entire life is actually lived, especially in regard to, the book they keep putting out, with helping people. And he saw himself as helping her. But again, we're talking about the 1950s,
right?
Not 2020. So, what he's doing in a 1950s context is being seen, in my opinion, through a 2020 lens, gendered black feminist lens, which in many ways didn't exist at that time period. So it was really a kind of unfair analysis of him. But what does he do in the midst of all of this blame and ire? He apologizes.
Right.
He doesn't articulate his experience. He doesn't articulate what black men are dealing with. He doesn't articulate how she's misframed this. He just conforms, apologizes.
Even in the 50s, especially, she wants to go out on the road, and and when he dies, she does go out on the road by herself. And back in those days, in a car driving across country in a racist white America, as a black woman, you were subject to that to be killed or raped.
Right.
And with no complaints. It was dangerous for a black man to actually do that kind of stuff.
Man, that woman, she would have got raped. They would have found her, took her to the woods somewhere, and the little girl. Because she doubled back like, I'm about to go back. Where you going, mama? You just hush, child. And look, let me just say this, man. This whole episode to me is black girl magic. But it's typecast as where it's typecast as black girl magic, but really it's actually black women's imagination, black feminist imagination, without any scintilla of reality, man.
Yeah.
I mean, and the reason I say that is because, first of all, like Dr. Johnson said, ain't no way no woman is about to rip through a whole pile of men in any war, at any time, in any historical situation at all. It just ain't gonna happen.
It's rage porn.
It's rage porn. Yeah.
Number two, women don't go off by themselves in that era, man. Not black women. Black men don't go out by themselves at that time.
Right.
Right. So a black woman is not going out during that time, and the man just wanted to protect his family. That's all he wanted to do, and make love to his woman. He wasn't a mean man. He wasn't an aggressive man. He wasn't a violent man. The only thing he did that was his crime was he was too protective, and he made her small. So I guess being big is going to sleep with women, going to learn how to be martial, just like men do. But I guess it's acceptable when women do it, but it's absolutely pernicious and patriarchal when men learn how to do it. It's just a lot of double standards.
Yeah.
And a lot of contradictions, man.
And the funny thing is, before she goes to the portal, she has to set up the time machine, and she's doing all these geometric calculations on the fly.
Yes.
That's
so
that hidden figures, man.
When her genius is hidden figures. When her genius is finally released, it's unparalleled. She's doing calculations that nobody's ever done. She's coming up with. She's figuring out equipment she's only seen for a minute. and we see that when she comes back as well. But she's gone for a while after that. She kind of disappears, and like you said, she's gone for about 200 years in her experience. For us, it's a couple episodes. So we get to episode 8, and I'm gonna kind of push along a little faster. But so episode 8, real life racist murder haunts our heroes. All right. So here, I'll open this one up. Maybe some of these images will spark some memory here. Here we go. So then we get the story.
The little bugaboo girls, whatever you call them. Right. Little demon girls.
This is considered the scariest episode by a number of people in terms of horror, right?
But I found none of this series to have any horror related to it at all. I thought, look, I'm a fan of horror.
Okay.
I've been so ever since I was a child. There was nothing at any point in time in this series where I was scared of anything. I mean, not even a jump scare. Nothing.
I think probably the worst, if you're gonna say something was scary, probably the closest was when they were in the woods, and I think in the first episode where the vampire creatures actually came out to actually eat not only the cops but also them too.
Well, but Freddy Krueger was an inspiration behind some of this, because the two little demon pickaninnies are she's the only one that can see them or experience them, because it's a white police officer that casts a spell on her. And so these pickaninny demons are stalking her the whole episode and terrorizing her, and nobody else can see it. Right. And so this is Hippolyta's daughter, who feels abandoned. Her father's dead, her mother's disappeared. And really even the rest of the family aren't paying her too much attention. So she's frustrated, she's angry, and at everybody really.
And this is, I think, the scene opens with them actually going to Emmett Till's Emmett Till's body.
Yes. Yeah. And I think they played that with the 1980s group Bananarama talking about Cruel Summer. So this is the introduction to the episode where they playing Bananarama's Cruel Summer, and it opens up at Emmett Till's funeral. Some shit like that.
But I didn't like the music at all, because it just did not fit the series. It's like anachronism to the core. Like, I get it, but I don't get it. It was terrible, man. Like, all I know about this episode was, like you said, she's exposed to these little demons. But I think more than anything else, this is about Black women being invisible, especially Black girls. This is intersectionality and visibility right here, right? And the funny thing about it is, how can people who are exposed to magic themselves, totally ignorant as it pertains to something that this little girl is going through related to a magical encounter herself? I found it hard to believe. I'm like, damn, y'all seeing ghosts and y'all are casting magic spells and shit, but you can't see this little girl got some little pickaninnies running behind her everywhere.
Yeah, nobody could. Right.
Nobody could. That was part of the curse, that nobody could accept her.
But the other thing, there's two other things that happen in this episode that I think we may have overlooked. One is Ruby is now actively having sex with William, knowing William is a woman.
Oh yeah.
And so they're actively having sex at this point, to the point where and this is why they called it gross, because when they turn back to themselves, they literally rip out of the flesh of who they've been imitating. Right. So there's blood and flesh everywhere. And so these two are having sex, ripping out of their flesh at the same time. So now you have, really Ruby engaging in, a lesbian type relationship, so there's a lot of allusions here to trans kind of, imagery.
Gender fluidity, all that.
Gender fluidity, absolutely. So all of that is playing out here. And then you also have in this same episode, of course, Tick is still dealing with his rage issues and whatnot. But Letty makes a deal with Christine for invulnerability. And she wants to give that invulnerability to Tick. So it starts out as a protective gesture. And Christine says no. Christine, the white woman, says no, I'll offer it to you. And Letty accepts it. So that was an interesting symbolic moment to me, where you first have this gesture on Letty's part to do something protective for her man, and when the offer for that power is extended not to her man but to her, she accepts it and becomes vulnerable.
Sound like a little bit of truth there, buddy.
I thought it was interesting.
A lot of truth was spoken here in this series. Lots of, if you catch
but you know how they're gonna regard this. She only did that because she was with child. That's why she made herself invulnerable. And of course, as we all know, the prophecy is that you know what's gonna happen. So I'm not going to even go there right now.
Yeah, but the white woman had made a deal with her. She had to give up her power, give up the pages, which is her power, to get the protection.
Right.
But that power, but to me, what it spoke to is this whole question of, Black women having access to power to where they no longer need protection. Because remember, Tick has been trying to protect her. And so she decides to protect him and instead now gets this power. So I think there's an interesting kind of statement there about, Black men's worth in that regard. And now that, Black women have that power without the need for Black men, Black men become that much more disposable.
But the point is, though, who gave her the power, though?
Yes.
Yeah. And but who actually had the power before her?
Yes.
Right.
The white man, her daddy had the power of invulnerability until Atticus took it from him, right? Which he really didn't take from him because, well, we'll get to that part.
Okay, so now we're transitioning into episode 9. Anything beforehand is open game. That's relevant to it. So we get to the episode. I think this is the one where we see Montrose's relationship, right?
Oh wow, that was just crazy, bro.
And so here we have, this is the lesbian relationship we talked about earlier with the gender fluidity dynamics to it. Larger, overweight Black woman, thin, delicate looking white woman. Yeah, there's no historical narrative there to play out in terms of stereotype, but let me see. Okay, so they know. All right, so this is the episode where we see Montrose in his little relationship, dysfunctional relationship and whatnot.
Montrose spits in his hand and goes to work.
Oh yeah,
it was nasty, man.
It was violent.
It was sex scene. Yeah.
And look,
he's a cross dresser. He's a what is it?
A drag queen.
Drag queen. Yeah.
Right. And Montrose is still grappling with his own, the extent to which he accepts his own sexuality. So there's a back and forth there.
But hold on, wait a minute though. I can't remember because I start falling asleep watching this stuff, man.
You dreamed some stuff, didn't you?
Yo. I'm just asking the question, man. What the hell happened to Montrose's face, bro?
Basically, Tick figured out he killed the
two spirit. So he beat his
and gave away and destroyed the pages, right? So he beat his father.
And that was terrible, man. Like who man, like who does that to the father, man?
Oh, we're not even talking about it. It happens all the time.
But I think so. The subtext to this too was also them finding out that Tick might not be his son.
Yeah.
And George might have actually been his father or something along those lines.
Yeah.
So now you have this kind of allusion to what is it? Because it was not something that anybody was overtly opposed to. I think both brothers had feelings for the same woman. Yeah. So you kind of had this dynamic where she had two men basically available to her, and they kind of all accepted it. Two brothers.
I think they pair bond is in a group because of what happened with the Tulsa riots. Their families got wiped out.
Right.
Their families were actually burned to death.
But the way they chose to frame this, though, was something we've been seeing more and more of in popular culture: one wife, two husbands.
Yes.
Right. So
man, that's crazy to me, man. So look, all I'm thinking is, man, I'm thinking of raindrops, drop tops. I can't say the next few words.
Okay.
I'm like, come on, man. His mama was starting like that, man. Come on now.
Yeah.
Hey. They were pushing for polyandry, and I think they found it. See, and this goes back to what BGS said, a few months ago about this series. They have conclusions, they have images they want to get to, and they kind of don't care about the story as long as they get to it. So to me, this kind of push for this polyandrous moment, right, where we can see polyandry kind of explained and rationalized. They just kind of did it, and they never really explained how it get to that, what the logic was of the characters. They just end up in this three-way relationship where Tick is, they don't even tell the man who his father is, and this is somehow acceptable.
And basically, this is also the when they first go back, because they need to get the names from the family home, which was actually burnt down. So they had to go back in time. Hippolyta had to send them back in time to actually get this book. And when they're actually looking at the house, like Tick and Montrose actually looking at the house, basically they see his father beating Montrose as a boy, because before George's dates corsage, and he said that, I don't want that kind of boy in my house. I'm gonna beat it out of you. You're wearing a flower, flannel flower.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So he becomes representative of toxic masculinity to the prior generation.
Yes.
Because he's abusive. He has no emotional presence. We don't even see him really beyond that. There's some moments where you see him protecting, because the whole house full of family members are under threat. Right. So you do get to see some protective moments, but nothing loving in that regard. So he's
and also there's it also goes into what they call child abuse or what they call corporal punishment by a parent, because it happened to Montrose, and Montrose beats Tick the same way.
Right.
Make you tough on me. I don't want you to be soft, because he's dealing with his own demons as far as being gay.
Right.
And or latent gay, when Tick is growing up.
But we're only talking about corporal abuse as it pertains to men.
Yes.
As if women did not engage in corporal abuse and still don't. Right. It's kind of limited to the men, and so Montrose is still grappling with the abuse of that, and Tick is grappling with it, but the women somehow have no relationship to it whatsoever.
Oh, in other words, heterosexual black men are the white people of black people.
There we go.
And look, man, I just found they tried to jam too much intersectionality into this piece. It was too many moving pieces for it to actually fit into a story that actually could, fit seamlessly into the kind of narrative that they wanted. Every show was a show in which they tried to prove some sort of intersectional talking point. And the narrative just felt forced to me. That's all.
Watchmen did the same thing, and I found out that J.J. Abrams is part of it, and it's never really about the story. It's always about the images that you actually portray on the scene. So,
what's the Watchmen though? What is the Watchmen?
The Watchmen was actually a science fiction, actually a comic book series.
Yeah,
it's actually based on a comic book series, which came on, I think it was earlier this year.
Well, it was based on a comic book series from the 1980s. It was made into a film, and then I believe on HBO they made it into a series, which we've only had one season of so far.
Right. What was her name? Not Taraji. What was her name that actually starred in it?
I know who you talk. I can see her in my head. She played in oh, damn it. They'll tell us in the chat. Regina King. Thank you, Kalila. Regina King.
Basically, they did a lot of storytelling through images, and the actual story plot wasn't as important. And I think it was the same thing. They had they actually jammed all these images on this little skeleton they call a plot. The plot was actually very thin. You could have done the plot within like 3 episodes. So the thing is, you couldn't jam all these images. So all these sidebars, side conversations, images about family and stuff like that really didn't lend anything to the plot.
Yeah. So as far as I'm concerned, like if you're going to tell a story, you can't have that many moving parts. Like you can tell part of it intersectional. I mean, not that I would anyway, but if you're going to tell a story about intersectionalism, choose one theme to work with, or maybe 2 of them. Don't choose every intersectional talking point that you could possibly imagine to try to force into one season. And but they that's what they did, and they covered every base.
Yeah.
I mean, they covered the patriarchy to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
They covered black women being as heroic as men.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all of the first episode actually. Then they covered homosexuality amongst men, and they covered latent homosexuality and how dangerous it is for everyone, and hate for trans women, and even normal, everyday, seemingly regular black men who were not pernicious still holding women back and making them feel small. I mean, it's a whole lot, man. It was too much.
Even in an allusion to paternity fraud between brothers,
it's okay.
And it's okay, yeah.
But see, that's the thing. Whether we're talking about Antebellum, whether we're talking about Watchmen, there's similar tropes, right? And you cannot have masculinity unless it's represented alongside, or at least if you're going to talk about heterosexual masculinity, it's played second to homosexual, transsexual masculinities. Those come first. So even if we go to Watchmen, right, we know that the grandfather character, who plays Regina King's grandfather in the series, he in and of himself is gay, and he's having sex with the primary white male hero, much the same way Ruby is with Christine in this series.
Yeah.
So this play on sexuality and gender fluidity, it's the same script in every movie, and I'm going to show you when we get to the end of this, the story's in the same way as well. But let's go ahead and transition into. Go ahead, BJ.
I was going to say, even in the Watchmen, they actually talked about the Tulsa riots. Watchmen actually opens with the Tulsa riots, and this second to the last scene of the episode of this series, Lovecraft, actually also involves the Tulsa riot. I think they even use some of the same sets.
That wouldn't be surprising. But they're telling the same story, which I think is the core of all of this. So we get to the last episode, right? Episode 10, right? This is it. This is the culminating point. Any thoughts, any reflections? What do we see?
Well, basically this kind of reminded me of the Matrix, where at the end of the day that the tick is going to have to self-sacrifice to save everybody. And it's been foretold that if you go through with this, you're going to die. Even though they try to sidestep, try to figure out a way to get him out of it from not dying. In the end, his death actually released all four of the women. Well, all three of the women and his father.
Well, and we also see in this scene, there's a street fight. It was kind of a street level fight that takes place. Now, mind you, most of the men are almost gone throughout most of the episode, right? So it's the women that band together. So you have, the Korean Gia, you have, Ruby who goes against her love for Christine to help her sister. You have Letty. All of them are kind of banding together. They even have gone back through time. This may have been in episode 9 too, in terms of the Tulsa riots, and they reconnect with some of the black women there, the elder black women who come back in spirit form, during the seance to prepare Tick. So, you see throughout this episode a constant barrage of powerful women, and it even results in a street fight at one point where, the women, they go back to Lovecraft to stop Christine, and they're out there fighting with some of the people that come from the Lovecraft area. And and so you're seeing these women out there in the street throwing, and it's just like it's a lot of male envy going on. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
And look, man, let me just say this. One of the things that, if you want to start getting off into African mythology and pantheons of gods, there's never in African religion a representation of African deities without balance involved. And there's absolutely no balance here. None whatsoever. No. I mean, it's just a glorification of womanhood with no counterbalance. Even the men who mean well, they don't know enough in order to do well. They're incompetent. Right. They don't know the true secrets. They don't have the true wisdom. They're not in an epistemic position to actually do any good. And so, one of the things that women were supposed to do, and I was going to do like a show on this on my channel, and I somehow have veered off the path of rectitude from doing it. But one of the things I want to point out was the story of Osiris, Isis, and Horus, and how ultimately Ma'at, the goddess Ma'at in Egyptian religion, is supposed to represent balance.
Right.
And it's a woman that's supposed to uphold the balance. And to be Horus's aid or Osiris's aid in keeping the balance with the feather of Ma'at, which is supposed to be the very thing upon which every person's soul is to be assessed. But what happens when the people who are supposed to be the keeper of balance have no balance whatsoever?
Right.
Right now, this is just ideology enshrined into what I would consider to be a poorly done, a CGI fantasy series that is it's poorly executed. I mean, I love fantasy, man. I mean, like Game of Thrones was a good damn series, man.
For most of it,
this is just not good, man.
Yeah,
no,
but
it's not good
because there's men thinking plot and logical progression, women thinking feelings and images, and that's what you have when you have women writers. I think her name was Marsha Green. She only
Misha
thought
Green,
of it. Misha Green, yeah. Misha Green is images and feelings. Is the images there to actually provoke a feeling? Even with I think it was one episode with I think it's the 8th episode when Ruby actually confronted Christina about the death of Emmett Till. And Christina said, nothing I can do. She said, I don't want you to do anything. I want you to feel what I feel.
Yeah, but I think part of the reason I brought the street fight up is the only person to really go down in that fight was Montrose.
Oh.
So the women led the fight, the women won the fight. So if we talk about it in the framework Gigi just gave us, right, where they become the most powerful, at least what men were good for in terms of protection on a physical level, even that is superseded by the women at this point. So there's no need for them. And with Tick's death, his sacrifice or whatnot, this is the last heterosexual man of the series. Right. So what do we end up with? And I kind of refer to it as the feminist Bandung conference. You by the time you get to the end of it, you have this collection of women, Black, Asian, white, not white, but you have this collective of women and one gay man. And so there are no heterosexual men or Black men for that matter who are present. And I think for me, it's appropriate that this is the capstone episode of the season, because it really kind of reveals the overall agenda. The way they imagine the future of the community is void of men, most particularly heterosexual men. We have no say. I mean, no presence, so to speak.
And who kills Christina at the end ends and white supremacy at the end. It wasn't the women; it was the little Black girl, and her futuristic arm that actually.
And her futuristic, right. Which, by the way, was created by her mother, who a couple episodes just pops back in with 200 years of super scientifical. I'm going to my J. Rue the Damager.
No, she got that George Clinton shit.
Yeah.
She's got that P-funk.
Right.
But I mean, you got to think about it, man. Ultimately, if they don't bring this Tick character back to life, if there's a second season of Lovecraft Country and Tick is not back, I would not watch it to do another analysis, my brother Johnson.
Well,
I would do it. But look, all I can say is, man, I was highly disappointed, man, by the series. Because I like fantasy, and I like sci-fi, and I like futuristic and magical stories, and there's just it was too much, just scattered all over the place just to prove a political point, and that's all it was.
So every intersectional feminist wet dream, was actually in here.
Yeah.
So in other words, people like you and Dr. Johnson can actually go back to just this series alone and take images and scenes from this and tell people exactly what they're talking about, because it's in here. You know, from the myth of white womanhood, or the want of white womanhood, to the white woman's wanting to chase a white patriarchy, and the black woman and the white woman actually teaming up to actually end white patriarchy so they can take over, not so they can actually end it for fairness, so they can be in charge.
This is what they imagine. I mean, they imagine themselves being the inheritors of an earth where the black men are killed, like you said, the white women are eradicated and killed, and they get to reign by themselves and get to engage in.
In other words, they don't end the patriarchy; they take it over.
They take it over, right? And men are gone, and it lines up very well with the kind of presence that intersectionality based movements seem to have, both in the academy and during the last few months, right? Seeing the resurgence of them in terms of protest activism. What we seem to be seeing, right, is this kind of shared perspective in this new feminist reality. We talked about this when I reviewed the Madam C.J. Walker film, right. And at the end of that, you ended with this feminist Shangri-La, right, where all the women live together in this mansion and they live well, and none of them have any men anymore because men are just a disappointment to them. And now they have each other and they can live on free and without, you know, this kind of feminist narrative that we also see modeled in The Color Purple, right? The film ends in another feminist Shangri-La. At the end of Watchmen, what do we see? We see Regina King's character more than possibly walking away with the powers of God, right? This feminist narrative, and it's really, as Dr. Neal points out, it's a black lesbian based feminist narrative, but it is the new family with the absence of men. The only acceptable men are either boys in terms of being children, or gay and trans men. But at the end of the day, heterosexual men have to die, and the only way they can exist for the time period they do is if they're willing to serve, sacrifice, and protect.
Right.
But protection has to happen on her terms. If it's a protection that she's uncomfortable with, it's oppressive.
It is demonstrated by Ice Cube with his initiative. He's protecting the black community, but not in the way that black women want him to protect the black community.
Right.
So he's attacked for it.
He's attacked for it.
And by the way, you know, but go ahead, Doctor. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Because I was just going to ask you guys for closing remarks. But go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, well, ultimately what I was going to say is in relation to Ice Cube, and I'm going to leave this alone. I've seen some misrepresentations of some of the things that Ice Cube said, even today on Facebook with some of my Facebook friends. I mean, ultimately he is being misspoke, you know, he's being misquoted because he said something to this effect. He did say this. Well, if y'all are not going to write the part on women, I'll write it then. You know, so they're taking his words out of context, because he asked them, I'm open to all parties who are willing to ameliorate the document. I'll give it to you and you can write the part on women.
Yeah.
And then what did they tell him? I ain't going to write no part. I ain't going to write that. I'm not going to do that. So then he says in response, I will do it then. Since you won't be participative and you won't be cooperative in doing so, even though you say there's a need for it, and even though I've also said that I'm willing to participate, I mean, well, you know, to allow you to participate in drafting that specific area of the document, they declined, and he said, I'll do it myself. Then he's misquoted by others as being misogynistic because he says he'll write the part for women, since the women that he is closest to, and one of the women that is one of the women he put on that he made her into a star. She wouldn't be sitting there with these other women if it weren't for the fact that he put her on. And then, you know, this is the kind of treatment that he gets.
Well,
you know?
He's George.
Yeah.
He's George.
But that's Ice Cube, man. That's Ice Cube, though, man. Look.
But they're playing him like he's George. Even if he's sacrificed, even if he's helped, it's still, in the end of an end analysis, is oppressive.
Yep.
That's the sad part about it.
Because he didn't do it the way they wanted him to do it.
See, I think I look at these film series and these television shows as prescriptive. I look at them as, archetypes for what's an acceptable form of manhood, of womanhood, all of gender portrayals, all of these. And when you look at it, one of the things you see is, we are acceptable and as disposable. And whether you're protective, whether you're sacrificial, whether you're withdrawn, anything is reinterpreted as problematic as long as you're not actively following directives being extended to you by the gynocracy. That's how I see these kind of dynamics playing out. And I think we're socializing a whole new generation into a very particular type of servitude. So that's me.
Well, at the current moment, man, I'm not for any of this, man. I'm sick and tired of all these tropes. And I'm sick of the whole idea that if Black lesbian feminists are free, that everyone else will be free by default. I mean, if the end result is some fantasy in which no men exist anymore, or if they do, they're just like these worker drones.
Yeah.
If that's what I gotta be in order for that to come to fruition, and if that serves as my freedom,
right.
Well, hey, all I can tell you is good luck with that. But the other thing I want to say is, man, white women in the early 70s, man, tried to form lesbian communes, and they abandoned them. I'm serious, man.
He didn't even pull no punches. He just said straight out.
No, I mean, like there was a group of women, man, who all over the country, they had these like little small cells of lesbian communes.
Yeah.
And the women in the communes came to the realization that, human beings aren't meant to live in orgiastic collectives. I mean, it's not how people get along. And then not only that there were predatory lesbians in the context of these spaces, man. These women, it wasn't just like a romantic, quixotic paradise. Yep. It was, some of these women were jerks.
What might have been an indicator to that is to look at the abuse statistics for LGBT couples.
Yeah, it's actually high.
It's actually higher than for heterosexual couples. So that might have been an interesting clue that may have played out. It could have played out differently had that been reflected upon, but it may.
Hey man, look, I got a picture for you, man. It's gonna look real messed up, man. If you want to show it, you can. If you don't have to, bro. But hey, look, man, I'm gonna share it with you, man. Me and Dr. Neil, man. We imagine this woman here, man, running around a lesbian commune, bro. Just think about it, bro. Hold on, it ain't showing. The picture ain't showing right now. Damn it! It might not be meant for me to show this shit. Hold on! You got to see this window, bro.
Well, you know what? We're gonna get together for a very short office hours for my members because this one ran long. So if you guys have time, I'd love to have you in there, but it's gonna be short. And if you choose to come through, G with a PhD, which I hope you do, that might be the place to show the image.
No, it's not a pornographic image. No, it's not.
Okay.
No, it's not.
But we're gonna close out here, and I want to thank both of y'all for being on the show because I really had no desire to break this down by myself. But I did want to give people, how Black men will read, can read some of this kind of this kind of revenge, power porn, feminist writing. I wanted to kind of show another dimension to this because most of the circles I've seen discussing this are feminists and either in name or in practice. And of course, they kind of ingest a lot of this with a fervor. This is considered empowering, but I wanted to kind of share a perspective, particularly from heterosexual Black men, on how some of this translates and comes across to us. So I really appreciate y'all coming through. And I'm gonna let people know for my members, you can go to the comments tab. In the next few minutes, we'll be opening up the office hours there. For my Patreon members, there's already a post on Patreon giving you the link for that. And to everybody that's come to support, I appreciate you. Thank you for your donations and your support. And y'all know how I like to close it out. So here we go. I'm here to tell you, brothers, we are not criminals by birth, perennial rapists, incapable intellects, man children, sperm donors, child support wellsprings, success objects, walking phalluses, ATM machines, lottery tickets, brainless henchmen, valueless assassins, pro bono mercenaries, unpaid bodyguards, interchangeable stepfathers, child discipline proxies, unpaid repairmen, workhorses, emotional tampons, or any other socially accepted dehumanizing stereotype. We are thinkers, inventors, innovators, leaders, fathers, warriors, and men. Embrace your humanity, know your worth, and extend your time, attention, and resources only to those who genuinely respect you. And remember, your worth is not defined by meeting other people's narcissistic, selfish, and unrealistic needs. You define your worth. Peace.
Peace.
Peace.